Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of What If Naruto Was in Attack on Titan. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Naruto said, sitting in a carriage next to Annie, Charlotte, and Zeke. The latter didn't seem very interested. Right now, they were on their way to a forest located within the walls, as they were currently in paradise. Levi, upon hearing the question, looked at Annie and Zeke with a frown. Any complaints? It seems like a perfect place for scum like you to rest, Levi said with a cold look. Charlotte frowned and clenched her fists at what he said, but Naruto calmed her down. I understand Zeke being here, but why should Annie and my daughter be here? Naruto said calmly, while Levi, who was riding a separate horse, replied simply. We still don't know if you were one of those who influenced Eren to invade Marley, besides it will only be a few hours, take it as a picnic, Blondie, Levi said with the same coldness as always, while Naruto seemed satisfied with the answer. This seems like a wonderful hotel, thank you Levi, Zeke said naturally, although Naruto could detect sarcasm in his voice. Levi, on the other hand, looked at the blonde Mayo with a frown. This is a dense forest with 80-meter trees, you wouldn't be able to escape on your own, there won't be any rocks or natural titans within reach, we don't want the shit and the blonde here causing a ruckus, do we? Levi said, looking at Zeke and Annie, who didn't say anything about it, but Naruto, on the contrary, seemed uneasy. Here you can have fun with your 3D equipment. These kinds of trees are only seen here, aren't they? Said Zeke as he got out of the cart, along with Naruto, Charlotte, and Annie, who noticed Naruto's nervous state with concern. Levi also noticed it, but said nothing about it. Captain Levi, I'd like to show Gabby and Falco this kind of nature, said Zeke, ignoring Naruto's nervousness. Charlotte, noticing her father's distress, held out her hand, trying to calm him down. Whether they can see her or not depends on your behavior, bearded one, said Levi, who moved by pure instinct and drew his sword the moment he felt Naruto grab him by the collar of his shirt. Levi had placed his sword against the blonde's neck, making the situation tense. I need to see Historia, please. If I don't do it now, there might not be another chance. Please let me go see her. Naruto said desperately, causing Levi to look at him frivolously, still with the sword at Naruto's neck. Zeke looked at Naruto and then looked away, knowing how it felt. Annie and Charlotte watched the blonde boy with concern, as he seemed very desperate. TCH, let me go if you don't want to die. You'll only be allowed to see the queen when this is over, and until then you'll be under my watch, Levi said, making Naruto let go and look at him with a frown. There won't be time if this keeps up, Naruto whispered, making Zeke sigh and place his hand on the blonde's shoulder. Levi didn't understand what he said, so he didn't say anything. After a while they walked to reach the heart of the forest where Naruto saw several members of the Legion who were watching him, but he just stared at the wine they were all drinking with a frown. Without saying anything he sat down where there was a campfire next to Zeke, Annie, Charlotte with Levi in front watching them, well apart from those of the Legion. Tell me, bearded one, I have a question for you. How can you turn people into titans? Better yet, how did you turn the entire village of Rangako into titans? Levi said coldly. Besides watching him, he had the mission of extracting information from him, and from the others if necessary. Oh, I find it wonderful that you're curious about my abilities, Captain Levi. Well, they're called chemical weapons. It dispersed in the wind like a mist, didn't it, Naruto? Zeke said, seeking confirmation from his companion, but saw that he didn't say anything, simply staring at the ground. Levi observed this with curiosity but dismissed it. Well, it seems he doesn't want to talk. Well, that gas contained my cerebrospinal fluid. If the people of Ymir breathe even a little of that gas, they will become rigid and paralyzed, then unconscious. I wasn't told how this effect is produced, but those who breathe this gas, even a little, and are descendants of Ymir, will become receptacles for the power of the Titans. All I have to do is give the order, and, through the Eldian path, the power will be deposited into them. That's why I can control them, Zeke said with a serious expression. He discreetly glanced at Naruto when he spoke about the paths, but Naruto was still staring at the ground. That village they turned into a titan is called Rangako village, remember that well, you piece of shit, Levi said with a frown, looking at Zeke who looked at him seriously. Yes, if I could have prevented such an atrocity I would have, but there was no other option. If Marley had realized it back then, neither Naruto nor I would have been able to help them, Zeke said seriously while the aforementioned blonde still stared at the ground. I know you don't feel the slightest remorse for what you did and that the lives you sacrificed mean nothing to you. I don't know if your true goal is the salvation of Eldia, but one thing I am sure of is that the lives of the Eldians present here mean absolutely nothing to you, Levi said coldly while looking at Zeke, who maintained a serious expression throughout. Wow, I bet you're popular with the girls. It's not good to go around thinking you know what people feel, Zeke said with a hint of mockery, while Levi looked at him with the same coldness. I say it because it's true. Besides, I was popular once, Levi said with the same coldness, while Annie paid no attention to the absurd conversation and only looked at her brother figure who was still looking at the ground with dead and cold eyes. I see. When will I be able to see Eren and experiment once and for all? Zeke said seriously, while Levi shrugged, looking at Zeke. We are awaiting orders from headquarters, Levi said coldly, causing Naruto to look up at Zeke with some concern. Let me tell you, we don't have all the time in the world, Zeke said with a frown as he glanced sideways at Naruto, who looked at him, took a deep breath, and then looked at Levi. Captain Levi, could you give me some water? I want to cut my hair, Naruto said, sounding odd. Levi didn't see anything wrong with it and tossed him a canteen of water. Thanks. I'll go that way so I don't bother you, Naruto said as he walked over to a tree, while Charlotte handed him a mirror and he took a knife from his pocket. For a moment he saw the Legion soldiers who were resting in the branches of the trees, then he sighed, knowing what was coming. On the walls. We have to get out of here, Gabby said as she stood in a cell next to Falco. Both were locked up after trying to kill Legion soldiers. I still can't believe that Captain Naruto has joined the Eldians on the island. What is going on? Falco said, very confused by everything that had happened, while Gabby frowned at the mention of Naruto. Commander Zeke betrayed us too, the two strongest warriors. Tisk. When I saw him coming down the airship with Charlotte and Cadet Annie Leonhardt, it was a real low blow, Gabby said, sitting down on one of the beds. Falco looked at her with concern, seeing nothing but hatred in her eyes. We're leaving here right now. Get ready, Gabby said, frowning. Gabby lay down on the bed and had Falco attract the attention of one of the guards. When one of the guards was close, Gabby began to fake a heart attack, alerting the guard who, wanting to help her, opened the cell and approached her. But as he got close, she took a stick she had hidden and hit the guard hard on the head, knocking him unconscious in seconds. Even unconscious, she continued hitting him, only to be stopped by Falco, who looked at her as if she were crazy. He's already unconscious, just leave him, there's no need to kill him, Falco said with concern, while Gabby stopped, but still continued with her hateful gaze. He's one of the island's demons, he deserves it, Gabby said, but she still dropped the wooden stick and they both left the jail. When they escaped they ran through an area with tall grass, making it difficult for them to move, but they still managed to reach a river where they washed their faces. The river was in the middle of a forest. What do we do now? We're trapped here, it won't be easy to get off this island, Falco said worriedly, while Gabby said nothing for a few moments. We have to let Marley know we're here, then we have to go get the original Titan and hand it over to Marley, Gabby said, looking at the water with determination on her face, while Falco wasn't so sure about that. How will we contact Marley? Falco said, while Gabby frowned at the problem. What are you doing here? Said a girl of about 12 years old with long blonde hair down to her back. She was wearing a simple dress and had light-colored eyes and skin. Gabby and Falco were alarmed by her presence. Who are you? Falco said, somewhat nervously, looking at the girl who didn't say anything for a few moments. It's rude to ask someone's name before introducing yourself, the girl said with a friendly look, while Gabby became suspicious of her in seconds. We are I'm Ben and this is my sister, mine, Falco said, distrusting her. The girl smiled at that and extended her hand to them. My name is Kaya, nice to meet you, said the girl named Kaya with a friendly smile towards both of them who didn't know how to react to this. With Eren. At this moment, Eren was sitting on a cell bed, staring at the wall with a frown, remembering something that was bothering him. But without saying anything, he got up and went to the nearby sink. With a razor blade, he began to shave his beard and mustache. Hardening two of his fingers, he took hold of his hair and cut it. When he did, he looked in the mirror and combed his hair back. Looking at his hardened fingers, he frowned, as they reminded him of the person who had taught him how to do it. Flashback, a week ago in Marley. So you're still going to continue with the rumbling thing, aren't you? Said Naruto, sitting on a bench inside a hospital. Next to him was Eren, who didn't say anything for a few moments and just stared at the ground. In order for our people to be saved, we must make the Eldian Empire return to what it once was, Eren said coldly, making the blonde look at him with a bored expression. You're certainly suggesting we become like Marley, aren't you? Subjecting the world to a reign of terror where we Eldians rule. Your plan has a selfish vision, and you know it, Naruto said, making Eren look at him somewhat surprised, but then frown. There is no other option but to be exterminated or to exterminate them. I don't want the endless cycle to repeat itself. I want the Eldians to be free, Eren said, making Naruto nod at his last words. The endless cycle you speak of will repeat itself. Haven't you learned anything? Fear breeds anger. Anger breeds hatred. Hatred breeds suffering. This is the endless cycle you will create if you continue with your plan. But there is a way to avoid it. Another option, Naruto said with a small smile, making Eren look at him curiously. Are you referring to my brother's plan? That plan sounds kind of stupid if you ask me, Eren said with a frown, while Naruto shook his head. No, if I want my plan to succeed, I must let you decide the fate of our race first, but once you see that your ideology is wrong, I will take the power of the original Titan from your corpse and fix what is truly wrong, said Naruto with a serious look, while Eren seemed surprised by this. What's your plan about, Naruto? Eren asked curiously, making the blonde point to Eren's chest. My plan is about changing history, changing the world itself, so that the Titans no longer walk the earth. My plan is. %% and $hash to Ymir, Naruto said seriously, making Eren surprised by what the blonde said, while Naruto had a small smile on his face. End of flashback. We have to end this once and for all. I must fight, Eren said, looking in the mirror and removing the hardening from his fingers. What are you doing, Eren? Hange said, approaching Eren's cell, curious about his strange behavior. Are you talking to yourself? I clearly heard you telling yourself that you should fight. That's strange, Eren, Hange said, a curious look on her face. Why did you come here, Hange? Eren said with a frown as he continued to stare at his reflection. Hange, seeing this, gave a small, sad smile. What do you mean, why did I come here? I came to talk to you. When we met, we spent all night talking about Titans. Although I was the one talking, you just listened, Hange said with a small smile. I trusted you when you said you wouldn't sacrifice history, Eren said, frowning at his reflection in the mirror. And it seems that with the arrival of Naruto and his daughter there may be another option, but I still don't understand why you went to Marley exposing yourself to great danger. Eren, if you and the original Titan fall into the hands of Marley there will be no salvation for us, Hange said with a frown, making Eren frown as well. I ate the Hammer Titan. It has the power to create hardened things from the ground and create whatever it pleases. In other words, you can lock me up all you want, I'll easily escape, Eren said, frowning at Hange, who looked surprised. And of course, you can't kill me since I possess the power of the original Titan. You can make all the threats you want, but you also can't kill Zeke, Eren said, approaching the cell door and looking Hange in the eyes with seriousness. So tell me, Commander Hange. What other option do you have? Tell me, Commander, Eren said furiously as he grabbed Hange by the collar of her uniform, making her gasp in surprise. Eren, you pervert, I see you're still in your rebellious phase, Hange said, making Eren release her. She left the cell, thinking about what Eren had said, and then sighed. Erwin, letting me be captain wasn't the best idea, Hange said, reflecting on what had recently happened. Time skip. 1 month. With Naruto. Naruto was currently lying in a tree being watched by several soldiers of the Legion. A little far from him were Annie and Charlotte who were sleeping on a blanket on the ground. Near the campfire was Zeke being watched by Levi. Naruto had cut his hair, leaving it as it was when he first arrived in paradise. Zeke, who was being watched by Levi, was drinking coffee. Why are you still here? Naruto whispered, staring straight ahead, making anyone who saw him think he was crazy since there was no one in front of him. Suddenly everything around Naruto changed and now he was in a small house, his old house in Marley. He was standing in the middle of the street, but suddenly he glanced behind him and there was a girl who was Lilith, who had a disturbing smile on her face, which made Naruto frown. Naru, what you did in Marley was very rude, you deserve punishment, you know that, right? Lilith said with a smile as she looked at Naruto. You haven't answered my question, what do you want? I let you live so you could do something useful with what little life you have left and you still want to kill me. You're stubborn, Lilith, Naruto said with a frown, making Lilith look at the ground and her hair cover her eyes. I'm here to tell you that I'm currently in a coma, but as soon as I wake up, which will be soon, Marley will invade paradise, Lilith said seriously, making Naruto look at her with a raised eyebrow at the information she was providing. Why are you telling me this? Naruto asked curiously, making Lilith smile, but not in her usual macabre way, but in a sweet way. I want you to prepare yourself, because when I arrive I'll tear you to pieces and turn you into inert shit, Lilith said, changing her sweet smile for something sinister that made Naruto frown. Without saying anything, Lilith began walking towards the house. Oh, and one more thing, Naru, when we meet again. I'm going to tell you something, Lilith said in a soft voice, disappearing from the area, making Naruto frown at this since it was very strange. Naruto blinked suddenly and looked around and saw that he had apparently been staring at a fixed point for a few minutes. He looked in Zeke's direction, ready to keep him company, when he heard something that paralyzed him. Zakli has been killed, said a soldier from the Legion, causing Naruto to frown at this. If it seems the area inside the walls has been taken over by Eren's faction, it appears Yelena and Eren acted under Zeke's orders to carry out this plan, said another soldier from the Survey Corps, informing Levi, who nodded. Apparently, arrangements are being made to meet their demands, as they apparently want to see Zeke, the soldier said, causing Levi to frown. Did Pixis order that? Are they really just going to surrender quietly? Levi said with a frown while Zeke and Naruto listened attentively to what they were saying. It seems to be the only way to prevent Zeke and the Jaeger faction from taking Eldia, the soldier said, while Levi frowned at this, as he was already imagining his plan. They're trying to get someone else to eat Eren so they can get his powers, aren't they? Are we going to kill him with our own hands? Levi said seriously as the soldiers nodded. That seems to be the case, Captain, said the soldier, frowning as he considered the situation. Don't be stupid. There's someone else who needs to be devoured by a titan, and that's the scum over there, Levi said, looking at Zeke, who pretended not to hear what he had just said. After that, Zeke noticed Naruto sitting next to him, while the older blonde gave him the signal, making Naruto sigh and frown. Zeke, I know it will sound very stupid, but it is necessary to do this. Many lives have already been taken, said Naruto with a frown as Zeke looked at him and then continued reading his book. Naruto, if we stop now, the previous deaths would have been completely in vain, Zeke said, making Naruto seem to understand what he was saying, and without further ado, he nodded. Enjoying your reading, Levi said, looking at Zeke, who nodded, while Naruto got up from his seat and headed towards where Charlotte and Lilith were. It's really interesting. That's why this is the 7th time I've read it, Zeke said with complete seriousness, making Levi frown. You couldn't avoid our conversation, could you? Levi said seriously, while Zeke shook his head. What, are you saying a book can't be so wonderful that you read it for the 7th time? Speaking of which, there's some wine left, Zeke said seriously, while Levi frowned. We've been here for a month, there's nothing left for now, Levi said with a serious expression on his face, while Zeke nodded and said nothing about it. It's a shame. What other tortures could be added to me? Zeke said with some regret in his voice, making Levi frown at him as he realized he was mocking him. Just keep reading, Levi said as he stepped back and began to walk away from Zeke. Understood, boss, Zeke said as he began to read again, but without Levi noticing, Zeke glanced sideways at Naruto, who had woken up Charlotte and Annie. Once Zeke gives the signal, I'll transform into a titan and swallow them whole, and then we'll go see Historia, Naruto said seriously, while Charlotte seemed somewhat excited, and Annie remained serious, thinking things through. I don't think it will work. Even if Zeke has the advantage here because of the wine, Captain Levi is a force to be reckoned with, therefore, I think it's better if I stay and help you, Annie said with a frown while Naruto thought about it while something inside him told him to take her along with Charlotte, but in the end he agreed. Naruto now. Ah! Zeke screamed, startling Levi, who watched in horror as his soldiers in the trees began to glow and lightning struck them. After the flashing stopped, to Levi's horror, pure Titan stood where his soldiers had been. The Titans began to fall, and before Levi could stop it, Zeke, Annie, Naruto, and Charlotte ran away. Meanwhile, Levi had to dodge a Titan that was about to devour him while he looked at the other Titans with fear, not fear towards them, but fear of what they had become, with no possibility of saving them. Trying to avoid a fight, Levi used his 3D gear to climb the trees, while the Titans, seeing this, began to climb the giant trees. Levi suddenly dodged a blow from one of the Titans and cut off its fingers, and when he looked at its face, he saw one of its soldiers. Guys, are they still there? Levi whispered as he prepared to fall to the ground, thinking of all his soldiers who had sacrificed themselves. The Titans, who were once his soldiers, were ready to devour him. While Zeke stood beside Naruto, Annie, and Charlotte, who already had experience in war, he simply felt a slight remorse towards the soldiers who had done nothing more than meddle in this conflict. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sad, but this isn't a conflict or a battle, this is goodbye, Levi. Out there the world is bigger than you think and everyone wants us dead, Zeke said as he summoned 3 Titans, climbing onto one of their hands while Naruto remained on the ground next to Charlotte. Zeke, Annie will come with me, I changed my mind. I'll go with Charlotte for history. Good luck to both of you, said Naruto as he bit his hand and a lightning bolt struck him. When it disappeared, Naruto was now transformed into the Jaw Titan and without saying anything, he bent down, making Charlotte climb onto his head and fleeing the forest without saying a word. Annie copied her. Good luck to you too, Naruto, Zeke whispered as he watched Naruto disappear over the horizon, and without saying anything, Zeke winked at a Titan, making them both ready to flee the place. But suddenly a hook pierced the shoulder of the Titan carrying Zeke, surprising him. To his surprise, Levi was completely soaked in blood, implying that he had exterminated almost all of his soldiers, causing Zeke to frown. Go! Zeke shouted as a Titan behind him lunged at Levi, who frowned. But to Zeke's surprise, Levi sliced through the Titan like butter, making Zeke feel fear, while Annie grew worried. Levi wasted no time going after the other Titan, but before he could, both Annie and Zeke bit their own hands. Why are you alive, bastard? Zeke said as he transformed into the Beast Titan with a great explosion. Without saying anything, Zeke took the body of a Titan and tore it apart, tearing off the Titan's head, while Zeke hardened his neck. Where did you go, Levi? Zeke said with a frown from his Titan form as Annie pointed to where he was, making him nod. Zeke crushed the head of the Titan he had previously torn to pieces and threw it at Levi, who used the large trees he was in to dodge the flesh bullets that were heading towards him. Checkmate, you bearded bastard. You weren't reading obediently, but putting that aside, Levi said from the treetop as Zeke watched in fear, I think you misunderstood something. Did you really think you could escape me by turning my soldiers into Titans? Levi said in a cold, emotionless voice as Zeke continued searching for his location. Do you know how many comrades we've killed? You probably don't, Levi said as he plummeted toward Zeke, who tried to take cover, but it was too late. Levi fired 4 thunder spears at the back of Zeke's neck, exploding his neck and leaving him unconscious in seconds. Come on, get up, bastard. You barely look hurt, Levi said, looking at Zeke's body, which was skinless and had some of its organs exposed. I won't kill you. You still have to choose who can eat you, Levi said as he dragged Zeke's body across the ground, heading in an unknown direction. With Naruto. Naruto stopped running to watch as a huge explosion shook the forest, causing him to frown, but without saying anything he continued running towards where Historia was. Annie and Charlotte watched with mild concern as Zeke stood there. Annie knew for sure. Commander Zeke Yeager had lost his fight against Captain Levi. Naruto, do you know where Historia is? Annie asked curiously, making Naruto nod and run even faster. She's near Wall Maria, that's what I can sense, Naruto said through the mental connection, frowning. Meanwhile, Annie was bothered by the fact that the power of the original Titan was close by, more specifically towards Shiganshina. Time skip. A few days later. Naruto, transformed into the Jaw Titan, ran for more than 2 days without rest, while Annie and Charlotte hadn't been able to rest either because it was constantly raining, but Naruto didn't care about this. After evading the security of the walls, they had finally reached Wall Maria, more specifically where Historia was located. When they arrived at the farm where Historia had settled, she was in the garden when she saw a 5-meter Titan approaching at full speed on the horizon. It stopped when it was just a few meters away from her. Historia, surprised by the sight, gave orders to the guards watching over her, and they took Annie and Charlotte inside, while Naruto was still inside the nape of the Titan, which began to smoke and decompose. One of the guards took Naruto, who was unconscious, to a room in the house located on the farm. Inside Naruto's mind. Naruto, wake up, you've arrived, said Ymir's voice, making Naruto, who was buried in a sea of sand, with only his face visible, come to his senses. Without saying anything, Naruto opened his eyes and looked around, recognizing him in seconds. He looked at Ymir, who had a blank face, which made Naruto give her a small smile. Wow, I think I overdid it this time. Days passed and I still maintained my transformation, like that time I returned to Marley transformed into the battleship, walking across the sea. I remember sleeping for a week after that. Thanks for your help, Ymir, said Naruto as he sat down on the sand and gave a grateful smile to Ymir, who didn't respond and simply looked at him with an emotionless gaze. You've slept all day. You're scared, I can see it clearly on your face, Ymir said in a monotone voice, causing Naruto to freeze momentarily. You were scared from the day I showed you what was going to happen later, Ymir said in a cold voice, causing Naruto to involuntarily shed tears from his eyes. Before Naruto could say anything, an unconscious Zeke emerged from the sand, slightly surprising Naruto. Ymir, without saying anything, began to gather sand with a wooden bucket and started to mold Zeke's body, which was shattered from the torso down. Zeke, I thought you were dead, Naruto whispered, which made Zeke wake up and look around in surprise. Naruto, where are we? Zeke said in surprise, while the younger blonde sighed and pointed to Ymir, which surprised Zeke. Zeke, this is my biggest secret. This is the place where I got my powers, the place where all our ancestors meet. This is the place where the paths have their beginning and their end. You are at the coordinate, Zeke, Naruto said seriously, surprising the older blonde who seemed to be completely shocked. But how? Eren still possesses the power of the original Titan, how is that even possible? Zeke said in surprise, while Naruto looked at him coldly and glanced sideways at Ymir. I think that just like me, it was a life-threatening situation. I must assume that Levi defeated you and you had to use some suicidal trick, right? Well, in conclusion, you're here because you possess one of the 9 Titan powers and royal blood, unlocking the true potential of your Titan, which is saving you from death by contacting the original progenitor, said Naruto, making Zeke look even more surprised. Like, Zeke said wordlessly, making Naruto look him in the eyes and sigh. This is going to take a while, but we have plenty of time, Naruto said seriously, while Zeke nodded. Before I explain the next step, I want you to promise me something, Naruto said, frowning, which made Zeke look at him confused. What do you want me to promise you? Zeke said, somewhat confused, making Naruto look at him seriously. The end of this world has already begun, so I want you to go and protect Eren until I can be with you both, Naruto said with a frown, making Zeke nod even though he didn't fully understand what he was talking about. Naruto suddenly stood up, somewhat agitated, and looked around. He noticed that he was in a room which had several photos, including one of himself and Naruto at the farm. Naruto, somewhat lost, noticed that he was completely alone and, feeling a bit tired, got up and walked towards the stairs. When he went down, he didn't hear any voices, which made him feel a little out of place. With some haste, Naruto went down the stairs and headed to the living room, and when he got there, he froze at what he saw. In front of him stood Historia, Charlotte, and Annie. What paralyzed him were the guards' bodies lying dead on the floor, but what truly terrified him was Lilith standing before the table where Historia, Charlotte, and Annie were. She was wearing the Marleyan uniform with a disturbing smile on her face. Noticing him, she saw that he was ready to attack, but before Naruto could even take 2 steps, Lilith flashed him her severed palm. Hold on right there, Naru, we don't want your friends to get hurt, do we? Lilith said with a sweet smile, while signaling Naruto to sit down on one of the sofas in the living room. Lilith, what are you doing here? Naruto said with a frown, while she smiled at him instead. I already told you, didn't I? Marley has come to reclaim what is hers, and I have come to kill you by any means necessary, Lilith said with a smile, making Historia frown and look at Lilith. If you so much as touch a hair on Naruto's head, I'll kill you, you son of a. Historia said furiously, slightly surprising Lilith, who then smiled sweetly. My dear, it's not a good idea to have those kinds of tantrums. Especially when you're pregnant, Lilith said with an arrogant smile. Historia was 6 months pregnant, and the baby was obviously Naruto's, who was worried about her because Lilith was there. Historia, calm down, she's right, don't get so angry, it's bad for the baby, Annie said seriously, making Historia take a deep breath and calm down. Lilith, there's no need for us to fight anymore, Naruto said seriously, causing Lilith to focus her attention on him. Oh yeah, why? Lilith said with feigned curiosity as Naruto prepared to tell her the truth. TCH, it's because you're my older sister, said Naruto, expecting a surprised face from Lilith, who instead began to laugh out loud, making Naruto and the others in the room think that she didn't believe him. He, I know that, Naru, Lilith said, the last part with a small smile, surprising Naruto, who looked at Lilith with real surprise, as did Annie, Historia, and Charlotte. Since when have you known? Naruto said in surprise, making Lilith smile at him and strike a thoughtful pose. From the day I placed those cute marks on your cheeks, little brother, Lilith said with a smile, making Naruto look completely shocked. So, why do you hate me so much? I'm your brother, aren't I? Why do you want to kill me? Naruto said with a completely lost look, while Lilith looked at him with hatred this time. Isn't it obvious? Isabel is dead because of you. Besides that, you boast about possessing royal blood and Ackerman blood when you're just scum who was lucky to survive that day. Naruto, my duty as your older sister is to kill you in the most painful way possible and make you pay for all your sins, Lilith said with a hateful look towards him, leaving Naruto with a lost and dark expression, worrying Historia, Annie, and Charlotte. Charlotte frowned at what Lilith was saying and, in an act of defiance, pulled a knife from her pocket, ready to attack. Lilith, in a swift movement that alerted Naruto, hardened her hand and quickly slit Charlotte's throat, surprising everyone in the room. Naruto saw Charlotte's body bleeding profusely, with no possibility of saving her. At first, Naruto was in shock, then he glared furiously at Lilith, ready to attack her, but before he could reach her, she showed him her severed palm, which began to emit sparks. Bad move, little brother, Lilith said with a disturbing smile on her face, making Naruto see everything in slow motion. He saw Annie ready to transform and protect Historia, but it was too late, and before Naruto could do anything, Lilith caused an explosion comparable to a nuclear bomb, devastating everything within a 100-meter radius. Naruto's POV. Am I already dead? So I finish it off that easily, huh? I suppose all the sins that have brought me here are the ones I'm being judged for. Naruto was currently seeing only darkness while thinking about Lilith's words, the sudden death of his adopted daughter, and the hatred his older sister had for him, which in his eyes was justified. Fin del POV. You can't die yet, Naruto, you promised me, said Ymir's voice, making him look in the direction of the voice with a dead look. What good is that promise, Ymir? Now I'm completely alone. I have nothing worth protecting. Historia died with my unborn child, Annie can't save her, and my daughter was murdered right in front of me without me being able to do anything, Naruto said in a dead voice, making Ymir think for a few moments. Do you remember what you used to say when you were a child? When a power is passed on to another, it doesn't mean that the previous person dies and only bequeaths you their power. It means that they passed on their experiences, their good times, their bad times, and you know why. So that you could learn from them. That means that person is still alive in you, Ymir said, making Naruto look slightly interested in what she said. And what does that have to do with anything, Ymir? My power was inherited directly from you, Naruto said in a dead voice, though it did spark a slight interest. For that very reason, you are my children, connected to me by the pathways. Therefore, Naruto, your power can connect not only with the wielders but also with your Eldian brethren. This means they all rely on you to secure their future, even if they don't know it, Ymir said, making Naruto see clearly this time. He looked at Ymir, who held something in her hands that appeared to be a light. Don't let the death of your loved ones be an obstacle. See it as an act of trust in you. The power you possess has been entrusted from generation to each of Ymir's children, with the hope that one day they will find true freedom. Gamber, do your best, Naruto. We'll be watching you, Ymir said, handing the light to Naruto, who took it, illuminating the entire area. In the real world, Naruto had surprisingly survived the great explosion which devastated a large area. Naruto survived because at the last moment Ymir had transformed him into the armored titan, leaving him without hardened skin covering him and without some limbs, causing his body to be smoking. Naruto looked ahead and saw without interest how Lilith was transformed into the colossal titan. At first Naruto looked at her with disinterest, but then he bit his lip with a frown as it bled, causing a lightning bolt to strike him, changing the form of his titan into the titan that could wield all the powers he had collected so far, that is, the titan he used against Eren that time. Lilith, perhaps you are right that I have committed many sins, but thanks to them I have come this far, so I will not let the death of all those I affect be in vain. This world will see its end by my hand, Naruto thought with hatred from the back of his titan's neck as it began to emit a lot of steam. Little by little, Naruto got up, which impressed Lilith, but then he smiled, causing his titan to vanish in a wave of steam, and while in the air, he bit his hand and transformed into the same titan he used in his battle with Mare. Grrrah! Roared Naruto from his titan as it began to emit a lot of smoke and several red fissures that occasionally erupted fire were found on the body of Naruto's titan. The eyes of Naruto's titan were now completely blue which only looked at Lilith with hatred. Without saying anything other than roaring, Naruto charged at Lilith, who was ready to trap him in her sea of hardening thorns. But to her surprise, Naruto hardened his legs, breaking one of the hardened thorns, and when he was close to her, he gave her a strong blow that sent her rolling to the ground. Lilith frowned at this, hardened several parts of her body, and charged at Naruto, who roared loudly as if possessed by hatred, which he was. When Lilith was close, she delivered a powerful right hook that struck Naruto's mouth, causing him to open his mouth and swallow Lilith's fist. Unexpectedly, he then executed a hold that sent her to the ground and forcefully ripped off the arm with which she had thrown the punch. Grrrah! Naruto screamed like an enraged beast. Lilith, seeing this, felt fear. Taking measures against it, she made her titan harden completely, causing several thorns to pierce the body of Naruto's titan, which didn't seem to care. Lilith took advantage of this to escape by exiting through the back of his neck and, being only a few meters away, she bit his hand, transforming back into a titan. Naruto, seeing this, removed the stakes that had been stuck into his body, causing him to regenerate quickly. Naruto charged towards Lilith, who, in an attempt to stop him, summoned a hardened crystal wall from the ground. Undeterred, Naruto charged at the wall, hardening his arm and delivering a powerful blow that shattered it in seconds, causing Lilith to frown. Preparing for his approach, Lilith caused her titan's right arm to release a great deal of steam. Naruto took this to heart and was ready to strike Lilith's titan in the face, but before he could touch it, Lilith dodged with her right arm, delivering a powerful blow that hardened at the last moment, shattering Naruto's titan's jaw and part of its face. You're still weak, little brother. You'd better die already so you can see your wife in hell, Lilith said from her titan, making Naruto frown with hatred towards her as he tried to get up. But before he could stand, Lilith ran towards him and, hardening her foot, made a tackle that broke the legs of Naruto's titan, who frowned at this. Without further ado, Lilith began to strike Naruto's titan face with force, causing Naruto to nearly lose consciousness with each blow. Lilith smiled at Naruto's condition. TCH, scum like you doesn't deserve to be devoured, just die, Lilith said from her titan, making Naruto watch with half-open eyes as Lilith created a stake of hardened crystal and was ready to kill him. In the end it was all for nothing, huh? Lilith is stronger than me, it seems, Naruto thought with a dead look, but before he could fall unconscious and die, he remembered something. Flashback. About 7 years ago. Well, warriors, you have passed the test and become soldiers of Marley, said Commander Magath as he observed Reiner, Bertolt, Annie, Peek, and Marcel, who were dressed in their warrior uniforms and were now teenagers of about 14 years old. By order of the Marshal, 2 more warriors will join our ranks. Present yourselves, brats, Magath said, causing Naruto and Lilith to be noticed by the others. Naruto had a cold look on his face and patches on his cheeks, while Lilith smiled at everyone with a childlike expression. My name is Lilith Fritz and this boy next to me is Naruto. Apparently, he doesn't have a last name. We're both 16 years old. Nice to meet you, Lilith said with a playful smile on her face, prompting Peak, Marcel, Reiner, and Bertolt to introduce themselves and return the greeting. Naruto ignored everyone and stared at the ground as if it were the most interesting thing in the world, but what he didn't know was that Annie was watching him with curiosity. Later that day, Naruto was in the training field under a tree completely alone, just staring into space. Ymir, that girl who was watching me. Who is she? She seems familiar, Naruto said curiously, while Ymir didn't say anything until finally she answered. Your memories are still blurry, but I can faintly see a woman who possessed the same titanic power as her. That woman was close to you, Ymir said from within Naruto's mind, causing him to nod. But he was suddenly alarmed when he sensed a presence behind the tree, and acting quickly, he moved and pointed a knife he kept in his pocket at the intruder. Upon realizing who it was, Naruto lowered the knife and looked at Annie, who was standing there staring at him with a dead look, causing them both to look at each other in the same way for a good while. You look familiar. Have I seen you before? Annie said with curiosity in her voice while her face seemed to remain cold. Naruto nodded in response. I knew your predecessor, but I have amnesia so I don't remember her very well, Naruto said in an emotionless voice as he sat down in the tree. Annie, without any explanation, copied him by sitting next to him. I see. My name is Annie Leonhardt, yours is Naruto, isn't it? Annie said while maintaining her cold expression, making Naruto nod. Annie-san, do you want to be my friend? Naruto asked curiously, making Annie think about it for a few seconds, but then something inside her made her accept. Yes, but what do friends do? Annie asked curiously, making Naruto think for a few moments, then look at her. Well, I've never had friends, or rather, I don't remember having any friends, but I guess friends protect each other, right? Naruto said curiously, making Annie nod, but she looked at him for a few moments. But I thought you and Lilith were friends, Annie said curiously, her expression devoid of emotion, causing Naruto to shake his head and unconsciously touch his cheeks, which were covered in patches, apparently due to an injury. She's not my friend. Lilith is very mean. I'd rather you be my friend, Naruto said, looking at Annie who nodded in response. Well, I guess from now on we'll be friends, Naruto, Annie said, giving him a small smile that made Naruto smile too. End of flashback. Annie, Naruto thought as he remembered that day, he was filled with sadness because in the end he had not been able to protect her from Lilith who had killed her with the explosion she caused a few moments ago. Naruto had another memory before this. Flashback. 8 years ago. Currently, war had broken out with the Middle East, making Naruto, Lilith, Peak, and Zeke Marley's only line of defense, as they were the only Titan powers they possessed at the moment, since Annie, Reiner, Bertolt, and Marcel had gone to Paradise in search of the power of the founding Titan. This brings us to our current situation, where Naruto was hiding in a ruined building, having been separated from his group by a surprise attack from the enemy, which resulted in the death of his entire squad and left him badly injured. Naruto was about to leave the place when he suddenly heard crying, which alerted him and made him point his weapon towards where the voice was. Naruto slowly approached where the voice was and when he found it he saw with slight surprise a small red-haired girl, who was full of bruises and dirty as well as her clothes which were also torn. The girl, upon seeing Naruto, became alarmed and so frightened that she tried to get away from him as quickly as possible. Naruto, seeing this, frowned, scaring the girl even more. Sir, please don't hurt me, I beg you, don't hurt me, said the girl with tears in her eyes, making Naruto raise an eyebrow. I'm not going to hurt you, but tell me something, how do you know my language? Naruto said curiously as he placed the weapon on his back. The girl looked at him for a few moments with concern about what was going to happen. My mom taught me, the girl said nervously, making Naruto look even more interested, while the girl looked at the ground under Naruto's fixed gaze. I see, tell me, was your mother Eldian? Naruto asked curiously, making the girl nod. Naruto thought for a few moments, Eldians in the Middle East. That's strange, but putting that aside, tell me, little girl, what's your name? Naruto said as he crouched down to be at the girl's level and gave her a smile that made the girl less scared. My name is Charlotte Fritz, sir, Charlotte said nervously, causing Naruto to be surprised by this, but then he regained his senses. Tell me, Charlotte, do you want to come with me and leave this place? Naruto said with a kind smile, making Charlotte think about it for a few moments, but then she nodded. But before she could say anything, a slight tremor shook the area, making Naruto frown as he felt Lilith's power being activated. Without saying anything, Naruto and Charlotte left the ruined house, and Charlotte watched in amazement as Lilith, transformed into the colossal titan, walked around shooting down enemy planes that were firing at her. Charlotte, from now on I'm going to protect you. I want you to inherit my power. By the way, my name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki, said Naruto with a smile, while Charlotte, not knowing what he was saying, nodded. Yes, Mr. Naruto, Charlotte said nervously, making Naruto smile. He then picked up Charlotte, who was surprised at first, and carried her to a safe place. End of flashback. Charlotte, I'm sorry little one, Naruto thought as he remembered the day he met her, recalling seeing his adopted daughter's throat-slashed body on the ground, without being able to do anything. Flashback. A few months ago, more or less. Naruto was at the farm where he lived with history, since he had been absent several times during the war to go to paradise from time to time, manipulating the memories of his companions who believed that he was going to rescue survivors on the island, while also manipulating the Tiber to give orders to send rescues to Paradise Island. Naru, what are you thinking about? Historia said with an angelic smile which took away all the worries from Naruto's mind, who also smiled back. Nothing really. I just still can't believe I'm married to such a wonderful woman, Naruto said with a smile that surprised Historia and made her blush at his comment. Well, you better believe it because it's already been a year since we got married, Historia said with a cute pout, while Naruto couldn't help but kiss her forehead, making Historia frown at him. Naruto sighed and kissed her on the lips, which she thoroughly enjoyed. I'm sorry, it's just that I still think it's a dream, being able to be here with you without any problems. I really wish it could always be like this, Naruto said with a smile as he looked at the sky, making Historia look at him with a somewhat sad smile, knowing what he meant. You'll have to come back soon, won't you? If so, I want you to answer something for me, Historia said with a sad smile, making Naruto realize that she was about to cry. Yes, tell me what you want to know, said Naruto, approaching her and making them both sit on the ground, with Historia sitting on Naruto's lap. In a cruel world like this, anything can happen, so I want to know, what would you do if I were to die someday? Answer me honestly, I will do the same, Historia said, her gaze fixed on the ground, causing Naruto to be surprised by her question and then think of an answer. To be honest, a part of me would die with you, while another part of me would try in every possible way to see you again, said Naruto as he hugged Historia, who, feeling his warmth, couldn't help but shed small tears without Naruto noticing. My answer is similar to yours, but instead of wanting to see you again, I would create a world in which you were there again by my side, forever, Historia whispered, making Naruto notice her mood and look at her blonde head with curiosity. Why are you asking that so suddenly, Historia? Naruto asked curiously as Historia began to cry harder, making Naruto worry, thinking she was crying from sadness or pain, but instead, Historia began to cry tears of joy. I just thought of an easy way to tell you the news, but I guess I overcomplicated it. Naru, we're going to be parents, Historia said with a smile on her face as Naruto momentarily froze and got up from the ground to look at Historia's face, who smiled sweetly at him, making Naruto smile with excitement and pick her up, lifting her into the air while smiling at her. Are we really going to be parents? Am I going to be a dad? Thank you so much, Historia, thank you so much for this great gift, said Naruto as he put her down and looked at her with a smile, while Historia looked at him with a sweet smile. This is a gift for both of us, so I'm very grateful to you too, Naru, Historia said with a smile, while Naruto smiled back with excitement. Ha ha ha, I can't wait to tell Charlotte and Annie that I'm going to have a child, Naruto said with an excited smile, making Historia look at him curiously. Charlotte, she's that girl you told me lives with you, right? Historia said curiously, while Naruto nodded. Yes, she's like a daughter to me, I'd really like them to meet, Naruto said with a smile, while Historia smiled at this as well. I would also like to meet her and I also want her to be my daughter, Historia said, making Naruto nod as he looked at his little Historia who was excited about all this. End of flashback. TCH, sorry Historia, it seems I'm not as strong as you to change this dark world, Naruto thought, about to fall dead from the blows Lilith was giving him, but suddenly a pillar of hardened crystal made Lilith move away from Naruto's dying Titan body. TCH, my older brother wouldn't give up that easily. You were supposed to change the world, weren't you? Well, get up, said a female voice, making Naruto slightly surprised and see Annie standing there in front of him. But not only that, Historia and Charlotte were also there. Now that he saw it, the previous landscape of destruction had been replaced by a completely blank canvas. Come on Naruto, do your best. I'm sure that when you change this world we'll meet again. I believe in you, Naru, Historia said with a smile, while Naruto, seeing her, shed tears and clenched his teeth at the emotional pain he was experiencing right now. Even if you're at your limit, I know you can do it, Dad. I trust you'll finish your homework, and when you do, we'll be waiting for you, Charlotte said with a smile, while Naruto, seeing her, cried even more as he returned to reality. I'm sorry, I really wanted to save her, but now all I can do is end this once and for all, Naruto thought as his Titan slowly began to regenerate. Lilith, I don't know what you're thinking right now, but I promise I'm going to kill you right now, Naruto thought with a frown as his Titan began to emit a lot of steam and fire began to come out of its limbs due to the high temperature they were producing, making Lilith frown at this. When Lilith saw that Naruto was going against her, she prepared her right arm, hardening it and causing it to release a lot of steam. Without further ado, she charged at Naruto, causing him to do the same. When they were face to face, they threw a punch simultaneously, causing both fists to collide and create a large shockwave that seemed to want to split the earth. But even so, shortly after both fists collided, Naruto's Titan arm exploded due to the pressure being exerted on it. Even after all this, you're still weak, little brother, Lilith said from her Titan form, advancing and preparing to deliver the final punch to Naruto's Titan. But to her surprise, just as she was about to strike, Naruto moved his head and dodged it. Lilith then watched in amazement as Naruto used his left arm, hardening it and preparing to deliver the final blow. Come on Naruto, Dad. Naruto heard the voices of those who had recently died and with determination connected a punch to Lilith's face, making the moment of connection Naruto pushed his fist down, sending Lilith straight to the ground. Grrrah! Naruto screamed as he began to forcefully strike Lilith, then turned her Titan's body around, hardening his jaw, and bit Lilith's neck, tearing off her Titan's head and devouring it in seconds. When he did, a lightning bolt struck him, causing him to emerge from the back of his Titan's neck and look around. His eyes seemed to have changed, now bearing a sun-like pattern, while his gaze appeared lifeless. I'm sorry, sister, Naruto whispered as he climbed down from his Titan and began walking in a specific direction, Shiganshina. He walked for a while, and when he reached a village near the farm where he had been earlier, he saw a man carrying a basket. Naruto looked sad, but then sighed. I'm sorry, Naruto said, raising his hand. As if by divine intervention, the sky lit up, and a beam of light struck the man, instantly transforming him into a Titan. Upon seeing Naruto, the man knelt before him. Naruto simply waved his hand, and the Titan carried him on his shoulder. It's time for this to end. I'm coming for you, Eren, Naruto said in a subdued voice as the Titan ran at full speed towards Shiganshina while being watched in horror by the villagers who were alarmed at the sight of a Titan. Naruto said, but this time he was transformed into a child, as the one speaking to him was Lilith, who was standing in front of him in her Marley uniform. When Lilith saw him, she noticed that he was looking at her with sadness in his eyes, while tears threatened to spill from his small eyes. Sit down, little brother. I want you to know the whole truth, Lilith said, abandoning the psychopathic demeanor she displayed all these years. Now, her face was filled with regret. Naruto sat down across from her, and she gestured for him to sit on her lap. At first, Naruto seemed to resist, but then she approached him and sat down, making Lilith smile for a few moments before she looked at him with sadness and began to hug him tightly. Naruto burst into tears, and Lilith did too. The truth is, I felt so alone, unable to hug my only family. Forgive me, little brother. I'm truly sorry, Lilith said, tears welling in her eyes, while Naruto stared at her hands as Lilith's tears fell into them. Tell me the truth. I want to hear it in your own words, said Naruto as Lilith hugged him closer to her, while she thought about what she was going to tell him. Well, to begin with, my power was given to me just like yours. I spoke with Ymir and accepted her deal, said Lilith, surprising Naruto who didn't know this part of the story. But, if that's why you always tried to kill me, why did you distance yourself from me? Why did you murder Historia, Charlotte, and Annie? Naruto said desperately, causing Lilith to place her head on Naruto's back and begin to cry. Naru, really, I never wanted to kill you. I always tried to watch over you in the shadows, when we met that time and I gave you those scars on your cheeks. I was simply trying to get Marley to treat you like any other soldier and not promote you so quickly. I just wanted you to live a normal life, but the truth is you were always someone who didn't give up so easily. Even when I tried to keep you from getting involved in this, you managed to surprise everyone in Marley with your control over the power of the Titans, Lilith said with a small smile, feeling proud of her little brother. When I realized it, it was too late to stop you. You had already made your decision. That's why I started helping you. I spoke with the High Command in Marley and told them to send you to Parity Island for the coordinate. When you returned empty-handed, I noticed you had managed to assimilate the coordinate, but I kept it from Marley. I warned you that your actions could be discovered, but I couldn't tell you directly as an older sister. I had to be your enemy so that Marley would never suspect a rebellion against them. I always tried to protect you, little brother. I truly hope you forgive me, Lilith said, slightly tightening her grip on Naruto, who began to cry as everything matched his memories, causing him great pain in his heart. But that still doesn't explain why you killed my damn wife, said Naruto as he was losing his mind over everything he was hearing, but Lilith didn't seem affected by this and said to him in an almost monotonous voice. Naru, you asked me to. I don't know exactly how, but a week ago when I was still in a coma, you asked me to kill your wife, but not to tell you anything about it until after I did it. It seems that the future knew you were hesitating about your decision. The truth is even if you asked me to, I feel like I shouldn't have done it, Lilith said with a regretful look on her face, making Naruto get up from her lap and look her in the eyes. Lilith noticed that her brother was crying. You don't have to apologize to me, this has truly been a great burden for you, hasn't it? Said Naruto with a tear-filled gaze, while Lilith nodded with small tears in her eyes and without saying anything, she stood up and touched Naruto's forehead, causing him to have a memory of Lilith. Flashback. Lilith was outside the house where Historia lived. When she entered through the door, she was immediately cornered by two guards, while Historia, who was in the living room, looked at her curiously and made the guards lower their weapons and leave the place. You know, making them leave us alone can be dangerous, Lilith said with a small smile, making Historia blink for a few moments before smiling back. Well, I saw you and thought you were a nice person, so it's good to have company other than the guards, really. After all, my visitors are unconscious, so tell me, what are you doing here? Historia said with a friendly smile towards the person who smiled back with a small smile. Now I see why Naruto chose you, you really are someone special. Sister, Lilith said with a kind smile, making Historia realize what she said and who was in front of her. You're Naruto's sister, aren't you? But what he told me made me think you'd be more evil, Historia said while looking at Lilith, who smiled sadly at that part. Well, my brother has the right to think that way. A lot has happened, and that's why he thinks I want to kill him, but that's not true. In fact, I want what's best for him as his older sister. Tell me, Historia, would you be willing to die for Naruto's sake? Lilith said with a frown, making Historia not hesitate for a second and accept. Of course, if my death means the best for him, I'll do it. Sorry Ymir, but I guess in the end I'm living for someone else, but it seems he lives for me too, Historia said while thinking the last part with a smile, making Lilith surprised at first before smiling at Historia. I suppose you really love my brother, don't you? Well, Historia, thanks to your answer, the world will see a new dawn. But even so, I'm sorry, I really wanted us to get to know each other better, Lilith said as she stood up and touched Historia's forehead, erasing her most recent memories as she left the room. Lilith had assimilated the coordinate through Naruto, that time when he returned to Marley with Annie. End of flashback. Naruto smiled to himself at this memory as tears fell from his eyes. Lilith, seeing him, placed her hand on his head, giving a small smile to little Naruto, who looked at her curiously. I've told you the whole truth, and I don't think I can tell you again. I've always lied to you, making you hate me or fear me. I used my arrogance and my false self to keep you away from me. I didn't want you to have a burden like this, but now I can tell you the truth, however small it may be. You don't need to forgive me, Lilith said as she crouched down to Naruto's eye level. He looked at her with a surprised expression. I know you can change this world, Naru. No matter what happens from now on, I will always love you, little brother, Lilith said as she pressed her forehead to Naruto's, making them look into each other's eyes. Lilith smiled at him as she slowly began to disappear, causing Naruto to wake up. End of the war. Thank you so much, sister, said Naruto as he gazed with a treacherous terror at the landscape in front of him. Now Naruto was on top of Wall Shinganshina as he watched everything go to hell, since there was currently an impressive number of natural titans, while Eren was fleeing from Reiner who was about to catch him with his armored titan. Naruto could see Zeke who was on the ground with his titan injured. I also noticed that many Marleyan soldiers were there. Peak was on the other side of the wall with Commander Magath, while no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't sense Porco's presence anywhere, making her frown. Naruto silently watched as the Legion appeared out of nowhere and tried to kill the quadruped titan. Suddenly, Eren ran towards Zeke, causing Naruto to move in anticipation of what was about to happen. But before he could reach Eren, he saw with surprise how Gabi shot Eren in the head with an assault rifle, sending it flying, while Zeke caught Eren's head. Naruto, seeing this, climbed down from the wall, bit his hand, transforming into the Jaw Titan, and grabbed onto the wall to gently fall to the ground. Grrraaahhhhhh. Naruto roared from his Titan, causing all the natural Titans to stop. Suddenly, upon seeing Naruto, they all knelt and made way, which surprised the Marleyan soldiers, and Zeke, who felt a very strong electric current along his spine, as did Peak and Reiner. The Legion members stopped and watched in amazement as Naruto's Titan walked on all fours towards Zeke. They didn't seem to move, as for some reason their instincts told them not to. When Naruto reached Zeke, he looked at Gabi, who seemed frightened, and smiled gently at her from his Titan form. Without further ado, he stepped out of his Titan form and looked at Zeke, who seemed surprised to see Naruto's eyes. Without saying anything, Naruto touched Eren's back, specifically his spine, and suddenly, Zeke saw Naruto's eyes seem to become brighter, and the sky began to darken as if a storm were approaching. Zeke, we're going to change the world, right now, said Naruto as Zeke felt that current again and everything suddenly went dark. Dimensions of the roads. Where am I? Eren said, looking at a large pillar of light that split into several branches in the sky. Finally you're awake, we're at the coordinate where all paths connect, said Naruto, making Eren look towards where the voice came from, and he saw with slight surprise how a version of his older brother was chained up and a Naruto who had a kind of trumpet in his hand, which left him somewhat confused. Zeke, Naruto, Eren said with some surprise while Naruto nodded, while Zeke looked at him wearily. Eren, it feels like years have passed since you woke up. I know you're wondering what I mean, since Gabby shot you and blew your head off. I caught her at the last moment, allowing us to make contact and obtain the power of the founding titan, Zeke said wearily, while Eren looked at him seriously for a few moments before feeling someone on his back. There's someone there, Eren said cautiously, but he was calmed down by Zeke and Naruto, who seemed calm. Eren, don't worry, she's Ymir, the founder, said Naruto as Ymir, in her infant form, walked towards them. How do you even know it's her? Eren said curiously as he looked at Ymir, making Naruto look at him seriously. When I told you all about how I obtained my powers, I omitted certain parts. One of them is that I had contact with Ymir, and she offered me her power. I've been here several times. She was also the one who rebuilt your brother's body, and she's in charge of making our titan form materialize through this sand, Naruto said as he took sand in his hands and it crumbled. So all this time, she's been here alone. Eren whispered, making Naruto hear him and smile slightly. Anyway, why is Zeke chained up? Eren asked curiously, prompting Zeke to take hold of his chains and then look at Eren. These chains represent the oath of renouncing war, of the first king of the walls. You, who do not possess royal blood, can move freely. You can end this once and for all, Zeke said while Eren analyzed the situation and then looked at Naruto. Why aren't you bound by this oath? Eren said, frowning, as this seemed very strange to him. I am a contradiction. I have royal blood and blood that opposes the power of royalty. The oath does not affect me, said Naruto, giving a direct answer, while Eren seemed to accept this answer and then looked at his brother, who seemed desperate. My dream, Xavier's dream, our dream. Please, Eren, save the world, Zeke said desperately, still grappling with something in his mind. Eren, tell the founder to modify the bodies of all Eldians so they can't have children, and then you can activate the rumbling and destroy Marley, Zeke said desperately, but Eren turned his back on him, and Naruto simply watched without saying a word. You want me to euthanize all the Eldians? I would never make such a stupid plan as that. I only cooperated with you to get here, Eren said with a frown, while Zeke looked surprised and then regretted it. As long as the Eldians live, we will never have peace. If this continues, the world will eventually fall into chaos. There will be no freedom for anyone. Why do you want to continue with this, Eren? Zeke said sadly as he watched his brother, while Naruto watched with little interest, but for him, Zeke had been right at first. Because I was born into this world, Eren said with determination as he approached Ymir. Founder Ymir, lend me your power, Eren said as he observed Ymir. But to his surprise, Ymir walked right past him as if he didn't exist and went straight to Zeke. Naruto, seeing this, realized that Ymir was in some kind of trance, so he lightly grabbed the trumpet he had in his hand, but in the end, he let everything continue as it was. I knew it, Eren. I knew you didn't think the same way I did. I knew our father's influence on you was very strong, Zeke said with a sad look, while Eren seemed surprised. What's going on? Eren said in surprise as Zeke tore off his chains and they turned to sand. Throughout all this time, I've learned that the founder can create anything here, including earth chains, only if someone with royal blood like me asks her to. In all this time that you weren't awake, I learned how to counter the ideology of the first king of the walls with Naruto's help, Zeke said as he stood up and looked at Eren. The founder has immense power, but she lacks willpower and sees people of royal blood as her masters, making her follow their orders without question. Now I possess her power, Zeke said seriously, while Naruto, upon hearing what he said, looked at him with a frown as he tried to control himself. This was noticed by Eren, but he said nothing. Impossible, Eren said, surprised, or at least that's what it seemed like on the outside, since inside his thoughts were different. You were the key, Eren, Zeke said seriously as Eren was suddenly bound in chains by Ymir, immobilizing him in the process. I'm glad I heard your true intentions. As I suspected, our father brainwashed you, but it's not your fault. We were born to the worst possible father, we're merely his victims. But I had another father who saved me, while you had no one to save you. Don't worry, with the power of the founder, I will save you, Zeke said with conviction. Each time Naruto heard Zeke, he became more certain of his future actions. Stop, this is useless, Eren said with a frown, while Zeke shook his head and grabbed him, and they both pressed their foreheads together, causing an electric current to pass through them both. If I'm going to save the world, I'll do it with you, Zeke said, causing everything to suddenly go dark for both of them and the sand to envelop them, taking them far away from that place. Those guys are so caught up in their plans that they make things so easy for me, said Naruto as he approached Ymir, who seemed to be in a trance. Naruto touched Ymir's head and she suddenly looked at him, her previously somber gaze being replaced by sky blue eyes that looked at Naruto with tears, and without further ado, she threw herself towards him in a hug. It happened again. Just like with the old queen of the walls, I can't get out of that trance once they start giving me orders, Ymir said with tears on her cheeks. Naruto looked at her sadly. Ymir, don't worry, just hold on a little longer. There's only a little time left before Eren takes control and everything goes according to plan. Once that happens, you'll be free, and your entire village will be free too, Naruto said with a small smile, while Ymir nodded, her smile full of hope. Now I have to go with them and make everything happen as planned. Ymir, I promise I'll keep the promise I made to you, Naruto said, his gaze filled with determination. Suddenly, he looked down the paths, focusing on one of them, and the sand around him enveloped him, plunging everything into darkness. Currently, Naruto, Eren, and Zeke were in one of their father Grisha's memories, specifically when he went against the Reese family, specifically Frida. Wow, this place seems very familiar, said Naruto as he observed the crystal cave and its surroundings, while Zeke and Eren didn't pay much attention to what he said and focused on Grisha's words. Please kill the titans that approach the wall, my wife and children, please, before they devour the people. Grisha said desperately, while Frida seemed unmoved by Grisha's words. We cannot escape our sins. It is the hour of judgment for the people of Ymir, Frida said gravely. But Naruto, observing her, noticed her eyes suddenly change, revealing the will of the first king of the walls within her, oppressing her. The power of the titans should not be in human hands, for if this power falls into the hands of the weak, the world will become a hell once more. To protect the world, our only option is to perish, Frida said with a cold gaze, while Grisha watched her helplessly. I think I could have gotten along well with that lady over there. Too bad Grisha killed her, Zeke said matter-of-factly while Eren looked at his father and Naruto frowned at Frida. That's not her true self. Some of her actions are influenced by the ideology of the first king, Naruto said seriously, causing Zeke to look at him with a raised eyebrow. Eren, you said that when you saw these memories it made you lose all hope in our father, or was that another lie? Zeke said curiously, then looked in surprise at what Eren was about to do, while Naruto didn't seem very surprised by this. Please, my wife and children live near the walls. People now know anything about their sins, all because you erased their memories. You call that atonement? Turning us into Titan bait, keeping us ignorant until the end. Grisha said desperately, while Eren watched with a frown, and Naruto knew what was about to happen. No, no matter how much we repent, we Eldians have no way to atone for our sins or the deaths we have caused, so the only thing we should do is prevent more death from other people, while we perish and accept the wrath of the world, Frida said with a look full of remorse. Grisha seemed surprised by her words, while Zeke accepted Frida's words. Naruto didn't give much importance to these words, but for Eren, these words filled him with hatred, something Grisha noticed. You can't convince me, and there's no point in taking away the power of the founding titans since, Frida said calmly, but Grisha interrupted her. I know, I realized I can't use the power of the founding titan, Grisha said calmly, surprising both Frida and Zeke. Every titan is special, just like the one I possess, the attack titan. From the beginning, the heir of the attack titan has never obeyed others, and I know why. It's to oppose the king's justice. That's why we've all been dragged into these memories. The attack titan is able to see the memories of future heirs. In other words, it's able to see the future, Grisha said, surprising Zeke and the Reese family. The attack titan. Maybe. No, that's impossible, Frida said doubtfully at what Grisha said, but he didn't seem to hesitate. I also know you're unaware of this, since as a member of the royal family, the king's oath prevents you from using the founder's full power, Grisha said calmly, before declaring his next action with a slightly hesitant expression. I will consume the founder titan's power and end the royal lineage here and now, as that is the future that has been set, Grisha said, surprising the royal family who remained silent in response to his words. Grisha was about to plunge a scalpel into her hand, causing Frida to scream for her family to flee, but to Frida's surprise, Grisha dropped the scalpel and looked at the ground helplessly. I can't. I could never kill children. I'm a doctor. I save lives, Grisha said helplessly while being looked at by Zeke, who stared at him in surprise. Your words are correct, Dr. Grisha, but at the same time you are wrong. The power of the attack titan is not the only one with the power to alter the past or cause the future, said Naruto, causing Zeke and Eren, Frida and Grisha to turn towards him in surprise. Michael, how can this be? I saw you die on the wall, Grisha said in surprise, while Frida was equally surprised. Naruto, how come? I thought that, Frida said, very confused, further confusing those present. I'm sorry Dr. Grisha, but the person you're talking about is my father. As for Frida, I'm sorry for what's about to happen, but it's necessary to save your little sister, Naruto said before they both looked at him in confusion. Wait, what? Naruto, how is it possible that you're doing this? Dad was supposed to kill the former founder, but what? Zeke said, then looked at Eren, who had a gloomy expression on his face. What are you doing, Frida? Kill that man. The founder is invincible. Do it now, said Frida's father, Rod Reese. Rod was a short man with short, dark hair, round, light-colored eyes, dark circles under them, and a mustache. He was currently wearing a white robe of his family's cult. That and more things her family said made Frida hesitate for a few seconds and then look at Naruto, who said nothing about it and simply looked at her. After that, Frida was filled with determination, ready to go against Grisha. What are you doing? Get up, Dad. Have you forgotten why you're here? Eren said, frowning, while Grisha seemed to consider his words for a few moments. Wasn't it to avenge your little sister devoured by dogs, for Dina, for your fallen comrades, for Kruger? You must continue even if you die, even after death, avenge them, Eren said with a look full of resentment, while Grisha pondered his words, remembering everything that had happened to bring him to this point. You started this story, didn't you? Grisha, Eren said, causing Grisha to take the scalpel, much to Frida and Zeke's surprise, and stab his hand in anger. After that, things unfolded according to the original story. Frida was murdered, along with her family, while Rod fled the scene. Seeing the devastation, Naruto stared at Frida's tightened body before turning to Ren and Zeke, who remained silent. After that, Naruto disappeared from the place, leaving both brothers alone, causing Zeke and Grisha to confront each other. In the dimension of the roads. It's almost time, said Naruto as he watched what was about to happen, as Zeke suddenly separated from Eren and looked at him in surprise. It seems you stopped, but you haven't seen how I devoured our father yet, Eren said with a serious look, while Zeke looked very surprised. So you were the one who pushed Dad to fight against the Queen of the Walls and against the world. If the Attack Titan's power has the ability to transcend time, then it also has the power to affect the past and show Grisha only the memories that suit you, Zeke said with absolute surprise on his face, while Eren remained serious at everything he said. Dad, Grisha, I doubt your duty as a restorer, Eren said in simple words, leaving Zeke still surprised. Dad didn't want to steal the Founding Titan, and he didn't want to use it either, but in the end he stole it and gave it to you because you showed him memories of a not too distant future where something big was going to happen, Zeke said with absolute surprise, while Eren didn't seem to care about this. Thank you, Zeke. Without you my path to my father's memories would be impossible, Eren said with a small smile, while Zeke still couldn't fully understand the situation. He said that nothing would be as I wanted. Everything would be as you wanted, Zeke said while Eren nodded seriously. Yes, that's right. I saw them 4 years ago. Memories of a future me in my father's memories, that was already written, Eren said with a serious look while Zeke clenched his teeth in frustration. Founder Ymir, take away the Eldians' ability to reproduce, Zeke said in a desperate move, while Eren was shocked by this. Ymir, in a trance, began to walk slowly towards the pillar of light behind her that brought the paths together. The coordinates, Eren exclaimed in surprise as he saw Ymir begin to walk. Naruto watched with little interest, but then he looked and saw the determination in her eyes, causing Naruto to simply observe. Grisha told me something. He told me to stop you because he regretted doing what you said. I don't know what you saw in our father's memories about the future, but it seems you didn't see it completely, since you didn't predict that you couldn't use the coordinate here. You're as powerless as ever, Eren, Zeke said calmly as he watched his brother become frustrated and filled with anger, and his plans went to waste. Grrrah! Eren screamed, trying to break free from the chains that bound him, while Naruto watched, ready to act. Without hesitation, he forcefully tore off his thumbs to escape the chains and looked at Naruto, who nodded. Upon seeing the signal, Naruto took the trumpet and played it, creating a deafening sound that echoed through the area, causing Ymir to stop abruptly. You're mistaken about something, Zeke. Someone already told me I couldn't use the Founding Titan here because of my lack of royal blood, which is why I asked her to accompany me, Eren said seriously, looking at Naruto, who nodded. Zeke seemed surprised by the blonde's actions. Naruto. But what? I thought you would help me save this world, Zeke said in surprise, while Naruto nodded in agreement. Yes, I will save this world, but not with your methods. The rumbling will buy me time, Zeke, and I'll be able to reshape this world, Naruto said seriously, while Zeke seemed surprised by his words. Ymir, please do as Eren says, Naruto said, and Ymir looked at him and nodded. Ymir, please activate the rumbling. I'm going to destroy this world full of suffering, Eren said with determination, while Ymir nodded and out of nowhere, Zeke disappeared from the dimension and Ymir raised her hand as the pillar of light that was the coordinate began to glow and the order was carried out. Everything went according to plan, Eren. Now I need you to buy yourself a lot of time out there. Once I finish my task, the world as you know it will be different, Naruto said seriously, while Eren nodded seriously. I hope this works and our freedom is guaranteed. Tell me, Naruto, that time when we talked you said you would change Ymir, how will you do it? Eren said curiously as Naruto pointed to the great pillar of light. Just like you did with your father, I'll change the Ymir of the past, Naruto said with a frown, while Eren nodded. Buy time outside. You have the coordinate on your side. Do what you think is best, Naruto said as he started walking and headed straight for the pillar. Without saying anything, Eren left the coordinates dimension, leaving Ymir and Naruto alone. Naruto. Thanks to you, Eren, now my freedom is closer, Ymir said with a small smile as Naruto nodded. I will keep my promise Ymir and stop the cycle of karma, Naruto said with a small smile, as he entered the pillar of light that was the coordinate. When Naruto entered the pillar of light, he found himself in one of his recent memories, where he was in a bed while his thoughts were focused on his plan and its consequences. If I continue with this plan, the world could be destroyed, Charlotte, Annie, and Historia could die. I think I shouldn't continue with this, said past Naruto, while present-day Naruto looked at him with understanding and, without saying anything, traveled further back in time. He was now in one of his memories from a few months ago where he was arriving in Liberio after the 4-year war against the Middle East. Without saying anything, the past Naruto walked among the people with Charlotte following closely behind. From time to time he received greetings or a grateful look from one or two people, while others looked at him as if they were afraid of him. The same happened with Lilith, who at this moment looked at Naruto with a neutral expression, then sighed and headed towards her home. But before Lilith completely left the place, she frowned as a Naruto approached her, but this one didn't look the same as the one she had seen a few moments ago, starting with his eyes. Lilith, I want to talk to you seriously in private, said Naruto seriously, while Lilith initially seemed stern, but then they both headed towards an alley, causing Lilith to frown at Naruto as she could sense much more power from him than usual. What do you want and who are you? Lilith said with a frown, while Naruto touched her forehead, causing her to have memories of the future and making her cry involuntarily at what she saw. You don't have to pretend anything, sister, I already know everything, said Naruto with a smile, while Lilith, without saying anything, hugged Naruto tightly, while Naruto stroked her hair trying to calm her down. I can't believe that I did that, Lilith said, referring to the death she caused, while Naruto said nothing at first, but knew what he had to do. Lilith, I want you to do what you saw in the memories I showed you, no matter what happens, Naruto said seriously, making Lilith nod. Naru, even though I already said it, I don't expect you to forgive me, but everything I do is for you, Lilith said with a smile as tears streamed from her eyes, while Naruto, without saying anything, kissed her forehead, making Lilith give him a soft smile. Thank you for being there for me, even if I never noticed. I love you, sister, Naruto said as he made the memories go further back. Now Naruto went even further back this time to his childhood in Liberio where he currently found the three Fritz brothers in front of a fireplace campfire in winter, while their mother was in the kitchen. Naru, give me another marshmallow, Isabel said as Naruto handed her what she asked for. She took it, placed it on a thin wooden fork, and put it in front of the campfire to heat it up. Hey Isabel, are you going to burn it? Lilith said in a somewhat monotonous voice, while Isabel stubbornly shook her head. Meanwhile, little Naruto was busy placing marshmallows on his fingers, moving them curiously, much to Isabel's amusement. Naru, if you want you can eat them cold, they taste good too, Isabel said with a smile as little Naruto nodded and ate them one by one while being watched by his sisters who looked at him with a small smile. Naru, you really are adorable, Lilith said in a monotone voice, a slight blush appearing on her face. Isabel couldn't stand it anymore, placed the fork on the ground, and jumped to give Naruto a hug. He was surprised and smiled too. Come on Lilith, I know you want to do it too, Isabel said with a smile, while her older sister hesitated for a few moments before hugging her younger siblings as well. The Naruto of today smiled nostalgically and then walked further back in his memories, but without him noticing, Isabel stared at him for a long time with a surprised face. Naruto went further back in all his memories and arrived at the place he originally intended to go. He was currently in an ancient village where the Marlians lived in the beginning, when they had no hatred towards Eldia. Naruto walked through the village, which seemed prosperous and where everyone lived in harmony and peace. He headed towards a hut where he found what he was looking for. In one of the many huts in the village, there was a blonde woman holding a baby with blonde hair. Naruto stayed close to the woman and the baby. For the woman and the girl, 5 years had passed, but for Naruto it was 5 minutes. Now the woman was lying in bed and the girl accompanied her with great dedication. Ymir, I don't have much time left. Despite the short time I spent with you, you are a great daughter. I want you to grow up and marry someone and have a family. Be happy and make someone happy, my little Ymir, the woman said as little Ymir nodded. Naruto watched this with some sadness in his eyes. Now time had passed fleetingly and now Ymir was 13 years old. Currently, she was with a basket and some apples in it. Naruto, seeing her so calm and happy, wondered what had happened. Naruto was beside Ymir watching over her, making sure she didn't come into contact with matter itself or anything like that, since Naruto didn't want Ymir to obtain the power. When they were both returning to the village, to their surprise, it was destroyed and being invaded by a kind of Vikings. Naruto frowned when he saw them, and without him being able to do anything, Ymir, along with other people, was captured as a slave, while others were tortured to death. Naruto fast-forwarded through Ymir's memories and saw that she was now the same Ymir he knew, even with the same somber expression. Naruto frowned at his surroundings. They were in another village, but this one was full of those Vikings. Upon seeing them, Naruto immediately recognized them as the first Eldians. Ymir was currently watching a couple get married, her eyes filled with curiosity, as she saw they looked very happy. One of you let a pig escape. Identify yourselves or we'll take one eye from each of you. Anyway, a slave doesn't need both eyes, said a man who appeared to be the king of the Vikings of that village. Naruto, upon seeing him, frowned, while Ymir, who was in the crowd of slaves, was pointed out by everyone, causing the king to approach her. This made her look confused as she was blamed by everyone, while the king continued to watch her. So you were the one who freed the pigs, said the king, making Ymir nod in acceptance of the blame. Very well, you are free, said the king, making Ymir look confused, but before she could say anything, one of the king's guards pointed a bow at her. Ymir, run, they're hunting you down, Naruto said forcefully, making Ymir hear him and run for her life towards the forest, causing those soldiers to take their horses and go out to hunt her down. After that she ran through the forest, but the horses were faster, putting Ymir in danger. Naruto, seeing the arrows heading towards Ymir, somehow stopped them, surprising the soldiers since, to them, there was nothing there, while to Ymir, there was a blonde man in front of her protecting her. Ymir, I promise I will protect you, Naruto said with a frown as his hand began to emit sparks while everything around him seemed to distort and the sky darkened. What I'm doing will probably damage time itself and end in catastrophe, Naruto thought as he transformed into the armored titan and the soldiers could finally see them, making them frightened. You Eldians have been barbaric towards other people, you will be punished by my divine judgment, said Naruto as he modified his jaw to be able to speak. The Eldians were scared and by pure instinct lowered their heads. What the hell are you? One of the Eldians said cowardly, while Naruto said nothing about it and looked at a large tree that stood out from the rest and by pure instinct took a large rock and covered a large hole that it had as if it were an entrance. You have angered me, a god, Naruto said from his titan form, carefully considering his words. If I can make them believe me, I can command their respect and fear, making them loyal to me, Naruto thought as he took Ymir in his hand. She was terrified. The one you tried to harm is my envoy. How could you be so insolent? Naruto said as the soldiers repeatedly apologized to the god before them. Lead me to your leader. It's time I brought order to these lands, Naruto said as the frightened soldiers led him to the king. When Naruto arrived at the village in his titan form, many soldiers stood on guard, while others were frightened by what he was. Everyone lower your weapons. What you see here is a god who manifested before us to protect the slave, said one of the soldiers who guided Naruto to the village. However, the king approached them and saw Ymir in Naruto's hand in his titan form, fearful of what was about to happen. Oh god, who has brought him down from Valhalla? Said the king of the Eldians, who was very afraid of what was in front of him, but did not seem to show it openly. Your race has committed many atrocities throughout the years, but I had faith in you, so I sent this girl so that you could atone for your sins, but instead you have done the opposite, said Naruto from his titan form while Ymir looked at him curiously without saying anything, while the king gritted his teeth. But she's just a slave of another race. Aren't the Eldians strong enough to consider us one of their envoys? The king said arrogantly, while Naruto frowned and, without saying anything, grabbed the king with his other hand, causing all the soldiers to stand guard to defend their king. You dare oppose my absolute rule. A sinner who does not seek repentance does not deserve to live, Naruto said, squeezing the king's body tightly, killing him instantly. This surprised the other Eldians and slaves. An era of peace among the nations will begin right here and now, as Ymir, my envoy, will rule and guide you to peace. Those who oppose it will die, Naruto said in a serious voice, causing everyone to nod and look at him in fear. God-sama, I don't think I can rule these lands, Ymir said in a monotone voice, making Naruto shake his head. Don't worry, my daughter, I'll be here to guide you, Naruto said in a soft voice, making Ymir smile slightly as he smiled back from the back of his titan's neck. Time skip. 12 years later. Currently we find ourselves with a young Ymir of about 25 years old who was dressed in royal clothes while guards were behind her. Now she was at a table in front of a man who also appeared to be a king. Thank you for your help, Queen Ymir. Thanks to you, Marley has been able to prosper and grow alongside you. I hope our treaty will be eternal, the man said as Ymir nodded and gave him a small smile. As Marleyans too, it's a pleasure to help. I understand that years ago the Marleyan villages weren't united, but now that they are, they can grow together, Ymir said with a smile, while the man nodded gratefully. I've heard that you plan to move your kingdom to one of the lands of the Eastern clan. The man said curiously as Ymir nodded. I believe that establishing dominion in those lands will be beneficial, but I hope that despite the distance we can remain allies, Ymir said with a friendly smile, which the man copied and nodded. After this meeting ended, Ymir went to her chambers in her kingdom, which, thanks to her decisions, was now prosperous and peaceful. Naruto, are you here? Said Ymir, dressed in simple white clothes, as she searched her room. Naruto had suddenly appeared in front of her, as it seemed his time had somehow frozen, as had his curse. I'm always with you, Ymir, Naruto said with a friendly smile, which Ymir returned. Naruto had earned the reputation of a god, and Ymir was his envoy. That's why the Eldians were currently respected by other nations, as they possessed the blessing of a god, so to speak. Naruto, as you recommended, I established a peace treaty between Marley and my people. Did I do well? Ymir said as if she were expecting praise. Naruto nodded in response. I guess you've done very well, Ymir. Thank you for doing what I've told you all these years, cough, said Naruto as he put a hand over his mouth to cover his cough, making Ymir look worried. Naruto, is something wrong? Ymir asked worriedly, making Naruto smile and shake his head. Don't worry, the curse has already caught up with me and it seems my time here is over, Naruto said with a smile while Ymir looked at him sadly. Naruto, is there anything I can do? Ymir said worriedly, while Naruto shook his head. Don't worry, it seems everything turned out as it should have from the beginning. Well done, Ymir. I suppose everything must have changed by now, Naruto said with a smile as he watched his hand begin to dissolve into sand, which surprised Ymir. But before Naruto disappeared, he placed a finger on Ymir's forehead, causing her to see the memories of the world. Please, at all costs, prevent what you've built from falling into ruin. Please be happy, have a family, just like your mother always wanted, Naruto said before disappearing completely. I'll do my best, Naruto, Ymir said with a smile as she looked at her hand and smiled even more broadly. Dimension of the Paths. Insert Ost. Shingeki no Kyojin ending 5 full. It seems you've returned, Naru, said the original Ymir, while Naruto looked at her with a small smile and, upon seeing her, gave her a strong hug, which she returned. Ymir, I kept my promise, I was able to save you, said Naruto with tears in his eyes as Ymir nodded while she began to glow and Naruto watched as she slowly disappeared. Yes, it was a long way to get here, but thank you very much Naru, said Ymir as she disappeared completely. When Naruto saw her leave, he said nothing and looked around, smiling as he watched the paths begin to glow, then merge into one, and then begin to disappear. You really did it, huh? You saved this world, brother, Lilith said with a smile as she watched Naruto, who looked at her with a smile and nodded. Yes, I guess this is my end now. I won't live again, Lilith. If we don't meet again, I'm going to hug you very tightly, just like I did with Isabel. I really wish I could see you both again, Naruto said with a smile as Lilith nodded and disappeared as well. He, you've come so far, darling. I'm so proud of you, said Historia's voice, making Naruto look in surprise at his deceased wife with tears in his eyes as she smiled. I'm really sorry I couldn't save you. Historia, I love you so much, please wherever you go, please take care of Charlotte, Naruto said with tears in his eyes as Historia nodded with a genuine smile as she disappeared. Naruto watched as the pillar of light began to disappear from top to bottom and smiled sadly, seeing that this was its end, but inside he did not regret what he had done because thanks to it the world would see a new dawn. Or at least that's how it should be. Real world during Naruto's absence. The walls began to tremble and thousands of colossal titans emerged from them, while Eren's head reattached to his spine, much to Zeke's surprise, who watched this with fear, while Gabby watched in terror as Eren's body began to glow and he transformed into a titan. Damn it, Gabby, get out of there. Reiner said from his titan as he watched everything around him begin to collapse, while the Legion watched this with a look of absolute terror. Gra! Roared Eren's titan, causing the colossal titans to focus their gaze on him. Finish them all, Eren said from the back of his titan's neck as the colossal titans began walking towards the Marleyan army approaching through the port. While Mikasa, Armin, and the others watched this with fear as the three walls fell at the same time, Armin went towards where Eren was with his 3D team while Mikasa accompanied him. Eren, end this absurd plan now, Armin said as Eren turned to look at him from his titan form. You still don't understand, do you? This is the only way we can be free, Eren said as he emerged from the back of his titan's neck with his head healed, while Mikasa avoided Eren's gaze, who understood why. But Eren, don't those people who will be born into this world also deserve the freedom to live without fear of this? Armin said, trying to reason with Eren, who looked at him with a small smile, which surprised them both. Since childhood, you always tried to resolve everything with words, Armin, when the world responded with violence, but now is not the time for this, Eren said as he watched the Marleyan army approaching and several zeppelins flying in the sky. Eren, what are you really planning to do? Mikasa asked worriedly, while Eren looked at her and gave her a small smile. I'm just trying to buy time. And once I do, this world will finally end, Eren said as Reiner suddenly stood up and went all out against Eren, who looked at him as if he had expected that. Raaaaaggghhhh, roared Reiner from his titan, while Eren, seeing this, returned to his titan with a hardened fist, delivered a powerful blow to Reiner's throat, and with the power of the hammer titan, expanded a dagger on his knuckles and swiftly cut off Reiner's titan's head, surprising Reiner and the others. Stop fighting, Reiner, haven't you noticed? Eren said with a frown, while Reiner, from the back of his titan's neck, looked at him with a confused expression. What are you talking about? Reiner said, confused, as Eren completely emerged from his titan and pointed to the sky. Reiner looked, as did everyone else, and saw how it darkened, suddenly turning into night. Everything is changing. This is the end. Destroy everything, Eren said as the colossal titans began to stomp on the army, making the earth rumble. Eren looked at his hand and saw that it began to glow. I guess he did it, didn't he? Eren said with a small smile, while Mikasa, Armin, Reiner, and the others experienced the same thing, which left them very confused. Eren, what's going on? Armin said, alarmed, making Eren look at him with a calm expression. Naruto obtained the freedom we sought, Eren said with a smile as each of the colossal titans began to dissolve into sand, surprising everyone present. Meanwhile, each of those present began to disappear into particles of light. Eren looked at Mikasa and smiled at her. I'm sorry, but it was necessary, Eren said with a smile as the world finally disappeared, leaving nothing but dust in its wake. Causing the world as it was known to end, everyone to die, the timeline to be changed, and the titans never to walk the earth. End of the war. Huh, said a 17-year-old Naruto as he woke up in a field full of vegetation under a tree. Looking around, he saw that there was no one nearby. What am I doing here? I had a strange dream. Naruto said in confusion as he shrugged and looked at the sky with a small smile. A female voice called out to the blonde boy. Naruto opened his eyes slightly and sat up, still half closed with sleep. When he did, he looked at the person in front of him, a young woman of about 17 years old with blonde hair that reached her lower back. She was wearing a school uniform consisting of a light white shirt that highlighted her pale skin, her growing C-cup bust, and her purple eyes, a black skirt that reached her knees, and shoes of the same color. Isabel, said Naruto while looking at his sister for a few moments, much to her confusion, but to top it all off, upon seeing her, Naruto began to cry involuntarily, alarming Isabel. Naru, what's wrong? Did I hurt you? Tell me, do you need medical attention? Why are you crying? Isabel said, alarmed, while Naruto touched her cheek and saw that it was true, she was crying. Without thinking twice, Naruto hugged her tightly, causing Isabel to not respond at first because of the surprise, but then she accepted his hug. I don't know why, but I think I dreamt that I lost you. I think it really was a nightmare, said Naruto, while Isabel said nothing and hugged him tighter. You two over there, stop groping each other, you disgust me, said a female voice that Naruto recognized very well. The voice belonged to a 17-year-old girl of medium tall height, with hair as black as night, eyes as red as blood, and milky skin. She wore the same school uniform as Isabel, only looser in the shirt area, revealing some of her cleavage, giving her the appearance of a delinquent. Oni-chan, I also dreamed that you died and left me alone, said Naruto as he let go of Isabel from his hug, making Lilith look at him in confusion and then look at Isabel who shrugged. Without saying anything, Naruto approached Lilith and gave her a hug that initially annoyed Lilith, but then she felt tears on her shoulder, making her worry about her younger brother. TCH, don't be stupid, little brother. As much as I wanted to, I would never leave you alone. It was just a nightmare. Stop crying now. You're making me doubt if you're really the age you say you are, said Lilith while stroking Naruto's hair. Naruto, seeing this, moved away from her and smiled at her with traces of tears in his eyes, which made Lilith smile back warmly. Come on, we'll discuss this later. Naru, go take a shower, we're going to be late for the academy, Isabel said with a smile as the blonde boy nodded and left, leaving the two sisters alone. When this happened, she looked at Lilith with a mocking smile, who glared at her in annoyance. Well, who would have thought you could actually be a good older sister sometimes? Or don't tell me you have a soft spot for your little brother, Isabel said, covering her mocking smile with her hand, making Lilith look at her in annoyance. TCH, just shut up. If you tell anyone about this, I'll kill you, Lilith said threateningly, but it didn't seem to work because the blush on her cheeks ruined it completely. Naruto's POV. I was currently in the shower, still thinking about the recurring dream I have because for some reason at the end of it I feel that everything that happened there was real. If someone asked me what I dreamed about, I would tell them that I dreamed about the end of the world, but the worst part is that I was one of the causes of it. Deciding not to think about it, I got out of the shower and changed to go to the academy, which I don't remember very well. Are you feeling better now? My sister Lilith asked, who seemed somewhat serious about it, but I smiled at her and let her know not to worry. We left for the academy, where I was currently in my 3rd year, along with my sisters, but in different classrooms. When we arrived at the academy, Isabel said goodbye to me since it seemed that Lilith was with me in the same classroom, although somehow I remembered it differently. As I walked through the hallways with my sister, many people looked at me strangely while others greeted me with a smile. End of POV. If I were them, I'd look at you that way too, since we're almost never together at the academy, Lilith said while glancing at her brother, who said nothing. Before either of them could say anything, Naruto was approached by someone who grabbed him by the neck and gave him a brotherly hug. You look a little disoriented, Blondie, said the voice of a girl who was about 15 years old, of medium height and slim build. Her hair was long and messy black and she had a sleepy look giving her a relaxed appearance. She was wearing the same uniform as Lilith, but with a light coat on top. Peek. Shouldn't you be in class? Naruto said, confused, since she was a first-year student. She was a close friend of his, as they had both attended the same summer camp when they were younger. What are you talking about, Naru? There are still a few minutes left. Seriously, you're out of your mind today, Peek said with a sleepy, mocking smile, while Lilith said nothing about it and simply left, saying goodbye to Naruto. As Naruto watched her leave, he was about to say something when he noticed someone walk by. Seeing who it was, something inside Naruto wanted to hug that person tightly. The person who walked by was a small girl with blue eyes and blonde hair. She looked about 15 years old and wore the same girl's uniform as everyone else, but in a more tidy way. The girl glanced at him and frowned. I don't recommend you do that. That girl you're looking at is part of one of the most important families today, the Reese, descendants of the secondary branch of the Fritz family. But you should know that, after all, you're a Fritz. She's a first-year student, Peek said, making Naruto look at her intently as he watched the girl leave and had a strange vision. Flashback. You'll have to come back soon, won't you? If so, I want you to answer something for me, Historia said with a sad smile, making Naruto realize that she was about to cry. Yes, tell me what you want to know, said Naruto, approaching her and making them both sit on the ground, with Historia sitting on Naruto's lap. In a cruel world like this, anything can happen, so I want to know, what would you do if I were to die someday? Answer me honestly, I will do the same, Historia said, her gaze fixed on the ground, causing Naruto to be surprised by her question and then think of an answer. To be honest, a part of me would die with you, while another part of me would try in every possible way to see you again, said Naruto as he hugged Historia, who, feeling his warmth, couldn't help but shed small tears without Naruto noticing. My answer is similar to yours, but instead of wanting to see you again, I would create a world in which you were there again by my side, forever, Historia whispered, making Naruto notice her mood and look at her blonde head with curiosity. Why are you asking that so suddenly, Historia? Naruto asked curiously as Historia began to cry harder, making Naruto worry, thinking she was crying from sadness or pain, but instead, Historia began to cry tears of joy. I just thought of an easy way to tell you the news, but I guess I overcomplicated it. Naru, we're going to be parents, Historia said with a smile on her face as Naruto momentarily froze and got up from the ground to look at Historia's face, who smiled sweetly at him, making Naruto smile with excitement and pick her up, lifting her into the air while smiling at her. Are we really going to be parents? Am I going to be a dad? Thank you so much, Historia, thank you so much for this great gift, said Naruto as he put her down and looked at her with a smile, while Historia looked at him with a sweet smile. This is a gift for both of us, so I'm very grateful to you too, Naru, Historia said with a smile, while Naruto smiled back with excitement. End of flashback. I feel like I know her from somewhere. It's a strange feeling, Naruto said as he lost sight of the blonde girl, while a single tear ran down his cheek, but he wiped it away immediately. Peek, at what Naruto said, simply shrugged. You might know her, but you wouldn't be on good terms. After all, you know, the Reeses aren't very friendly with the Fritzes, or well, most of them, Peek said, looking at her blonde friend who apparently didn't know this, which made her look at him confused. Anyway, Peek, you're not going to believe this, but I had a really crazy dream, Naruto said as he walked alongside Peek. She listened to what he was saying, but before Naruto could begin to tell her what he dreamed, he bumped into someone older than him, causing the older person to spill some coffee in Naruto's hair. Upon seeing who it was, Naruto looked in surprise at a young man. The man had tangled blonde hair and a beard, and wore glasses with round lenses. He was dressed in a white shirt with a black tie, brown pants, and black shoes. When the man saw the blonde boy covered in coffee, he quickly dropped the briefcases he was carrying and let them fall to the ground, taking a handkerchief to dry the coffee off Naruto's face. TCH, Naruto, how many times have I told you to watch where you're walking? One day something serious will happen to you if you don't pay attention, said the man with a frown on his face, but more than being angry, the man was worried. Zeke. Aye. Naruto said, tears threatening to spill from his eyes, worrying Pieck and Zeke, who saw how the blonde was about to burst into tears. Hey, calm down, was the coffee too hot? If so, let's go to the infirmary, Zeke said with concern on his face, but out of nowhere the younger blonde hugged Zeke, who didn't know how to respond to this action since it was strange. Are you high or something? Zeke asked curiously, while Pieck shrugged. Naruto was then separated from Zeke by Pieck, who dismissed what Zeke was about to say. I'm sorry, Zeke-sensei. Naruto is acting a little strange today. Classes will start soon. See you later, Pieck said as she dragged her friend down the hallway while the other students watched these events with a raised eyebrow and curiosity on their faces. I'm sorry, Pieck. It's just that when I saw Zeke, a strange feeling of sadness took over me, said Naruto as he dried his tears with the handkerchief that Zeke had used to dry his face. Pieck looked at him strangely at what the blonde boy said. Sure, if you say so. Come with me to my classroom, then you can go back to being depressed over there, Pieck said, dismissing what her blonde classmate had said. Naruto didn't say anything and simply followed Pieck. You know, even if Zeke-sensei is your cousin, you shouldn't call him by his name so freely, Pieck said, gently reprimanding Naruto, who was slightly surprised by the information, but then nodded normally. I'm sorry for my mistake, Naruto said softly as he walked alongside Pieck, who was discreetly looking at her friend, who seemed a little strange today. When they both arrived at Pieck's classroom, which was 1B, Pieck opened the door and Naruto peeked in, seeing who was in the room. Most of the faces there seemed familiar, but without generating the same feeling of sadness or nostalgia that certain people around him evoked. Suddenly, his gaze focused on a boy of average height and slender build, with his hair combed back and light-colored eyes. He was wearing the same uniform as Naruto, who stared at him, which caught Pieck's attention. Before Naruto could do anything, Pieck closed the door in his face, much to the surprise of the boy and a few others. What was that, Pieck? The boy said as Pieck shrugged and sat down in a seat next to the boy. Nothing to worry about, Porco, just one less drama to worry about, Pieck said as she relaxed in her seat while Porco looked at her. Strange, but he shrugged. With Naruto. Naruto was walking through the deserted hallways of the academy while rubbing his nose, from the blow Pieck gave him with the door. Naruto was looking at the signs of various classrooms and none of them matched the one he thought he was in. He walked for a few minutes until he reached a room that had a sign that said, Infirmary. Naruto didn't care much, maybe inside that room there was someone he knew who could help him find his classroom. Entering the infirmary, Naruto noticed it was deserted. He walked towards where the nurse was supposed to be, but she wasn't there. Shrugging, Naruto was about to go when a woman appeared behind him, startling him with her presence. She wore a uniform with a white coat over it, had dark brown hair, and looked young. Her light brown eyes, when they saw Naruto, were filled with affection. Upon seeing her, Naruto simply hugged her without saying a word, causing the woman to be slightly surprised, but then she hugged him back. Veronica-san, I really missed you, Naruto said with sadness and nostalgia in his voice, while Veronica, upon hearing the blonde boy, simply stroked his hair while her face rested on his shoulder. Hey Naruto-kun, we saw each other yesterday, you say it like we haven't seen each other in many years, Veronica said with doubt in her voice, making the blonde boy separate from her and look at her with a smile full of nostalgia. I'm sorry, Veronica-san, it's just that lately I've been feeling sad. Like I've lost everything, Naruto said with a distant look, which Veronica noticed. I suppose that's why you've come to me, isn't it? Veronica said doubtfully, making the blonde man shake his head as he wiped the tears from his eyes. Not really. Veronica-san, do you know which classroom I'm in? Naruto said hesitantly, while the brown-haired girl, seeing him confused, couldn't help but laugh at how silly he looked. I'm sorry, it's just that you've been in this institution for over 3 years and you don't know where your classroom is. It's really a great joke, said Veronica as she calmed down from the fit of laughter she had. Naruto shrugged, not caring much if she was making fun of him. Yes, I know I've been a bit disoriented lately, said the blonde man, shrugging his shoulders, while the nurse laughed a little at his actions, but decided to help him anyway. Your classroom is 1 floor above this one, 3B in fact, it's the same as your sister Lilith's. I don't know how you got lost, to be honest, Veronica said, somewhat confused, making the blonde boy scratch his head in embarrassment. As that's so, I guess I'm a little disoriented today. Anyway, thanks Veronica-san, said Naruto, quickly leaving the infirmary. When he got out, he ran through the deserted hallways of the academy and up the stairs. Without noticing where he was going, he bumped into someone, causing the blonde to feel a void as he felt that his body was inevitably going to fall down the stairs, but before that happened, his hand was grabbed tightly, preventing him from falling. Naruto first recovered from the small scare he had and was going to apologize to the person he bumped into and thank them. Senpai, classes have already started, what are you doing here? Said a female voice that made Naruto jump. In front of him stood a young girl, maybe a first-year student. She had short blonde hair tied in a bun and bangs that covered one of her eyes. Her face was completely serious. She wore a white hooded sweatshirt and underneath it was the female uniform of the academy. Annie-chan, said Naruto, unexpectedly hugging the younger blonde girl, who didn't seem to react to the hug, simply looking at him with a raised eyebrow. I'm sorry, Naruto whispered, making Annie look slightly confused this time and feel a dampness on her shoulder. Senpai, are you crying? Annie said in an almost monotone voice, but there was still curiosity in her. Naruto, realizing what he was doing, immediately separated from the younger blonde and quickly dried the tears from his eyes. I'm sorry. I don't know what's been happening to me lately. Sorry again for making you uncomfortable, Annie, Naruto said quickly, flashing a happy smile that contrasted sharply with his previous sadness. Seeing him like this, Annie simply raised an eyebrow and shook her head. Don't worry, Senpai, we'll talk about this in the club. For now, go to class, Annie said in a somewhat monotonous voice, making the blonde boy nod and run off to his classroom, leaving the blonde girl confused, but with a small smile at what the blonde boy had done. Knowing he was late, Naruto ran through the hallways and, looking at the sign for each classroom, saw with a smile one that was his own. Quickly opening the door to his classroom, he was greeted by the sight of many familiar faces, but at the same time he couldn't remember very well. The only face he recognized was that of Lilith, who was taking a nap, but woke up abruptly at the entrance of her younger brother. What a time to arrive, Fritz-san. Are you going to come in or just stand there? Said a somewhat mocking voice, making Naruto pay attention to the person speaking. It was a tall woman with long black hair and white skin with purple eyes. At first glance, she was a beauty. Currently, she was wearing a skirt and a formal white shirt with heels. When Naruto saw the woman in front of him, he couldn't help but get teary-eyed, but shaking his head, he pushed those nostalgic feelings away. I'm sorry, Reese-sensei. I think I got lost on the path of life, said Naruto, while Frida, faced with the poor excuse, looked at him mockingly, and some students laughed at the blonde boy. Without another word, Naruto walked over and took the empty seat next to his older sister. Some students looked at the blonde boy in confusion, and even Frida, but then the dark-haired girl dismissed it and continued with her class. While this was happening, Naruto looked confused at his sister who was looking at him with boredom. You're definitely acting a bit strange today. You usually sit far away from me, Lilith said with a raised eyebrow, while Naruto shrugged and smiled sweetly at Lilith, who looked at him with a raised eyebrow. What's wrong with being near my older sister? Do you want to come home with me, Oni-chan? Naruto said with a smile, making Lilith blush with embarrassment and sink into her seat while covering her face with the book on her desk. Sure, Lilith stammered, making Naruto smile at her. Some students watched the interaction between the two siblings. While the girls looked at the scene with tenderness, the men stared in astonishment as Fritz the demon blushed. The most violent delinquent in the academy was blushing with embarrassment. It seems Fritz-san is a brocon, said one of the boys in the class, causing others to nod in agreement, but they suddenly fell silent upon seeing the murderous glare Lilith was giving him, making everyone pay attention to the class. Oni-chan, now that I think about it, Annie mentioned something about a club. Am I in one? Naruto said in confusion, while Lilith forgot her previous embarrassment and looked at him with a raised eyebrow. You're in the kendo club. In fact, you're the captain. Are you sure you're okay? Lilith said, somewhat worried, while Naruto seemed slightly surprised, but then nodded with a smile. Yes, Oni-chan, I'm just a little disoriented, that's all, Naruto said somewhat embarrassed as he scratched his head with his hand. Lilith simply shrugged and went to take a nap, ignoring what her teacher said. Unbeknownst to Naruto, his older sister wore a genuine smile as she tried to sleep. After classes ended, Naruto sat in his seat, still thinking about that feeling of loss. He felt even more empty, as if someone truly important to him had disappeared. But putting that feeling aside, he looked at his older sister, who was still taking a nap. Smiling, Naruto was about to copy her, but suddenly the classroom door burst open, startling Lilith and Naruto, who watched with a bead of sweat as Isabel entered the door with a smile on her face, holding 2 bento boxes in her hand. Let's have lunch, Isabel said with an enthusiastic smile, which Naruto copied, while Lilith looked at her younger sister with annoyance. I'll pass. I have better things to do, said Lilith, getting up from her seat, while being watched by Naruto who looked at her sadly, something that was copied by Isabel. Aren't you going to eat with us, Oni-chan? Naruto said, sounding a little sad, which made Lilith look at both younger brothers with a raised eyebrow, because if she didn't know them well, she would think they were blackmailing her. Yes, Lilith nay, I thought eating together would be good for Naru, Isabel said, making the legendary puppy dog eyes that didn't visibly affect Lilith at all, but then she saw how her younger brother also made them and had to contain her blush, finally accepting, much to Isabel's amusement. Without further ado, the triplets walked towards the academy courtyard where the 3 of them sat under a shady tree. Naruto was the first to finish eating and stood contemplating the blue sky with a serene smile on his face, while his sisters couldn't help but smile at the sight of their younger brother in that state. Could you do me a favor? Before the break ends, could you give me a tour of the academy? I think my memory is a little strange today, said Naruto with an apologetic smile, while Isabel nodded with a smile, and Lilith shrugged, resigned to accompanying her brother. After lunch, both sisters guided Naruto around the area while the blonde boy seemed to be slowly starting to recognize the surroundings. Naruto and his sisters were passing through the floor where the first-year students were, when Naruto saw something that made him frown. Near the entrance of some classrooms they encountered a couple of boys and several girls who were harassing the small blonde girl that Naruto had seen earlier. "TCH, what's a bastard from the Reese family doing here?" said a boy who had the girl cornered, who was looking at the ground while tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "Isn't it enough for your mom to dishonor the Reese name, but she also expects you to be treated as an equal?" said a girl who was about to hit the blonde girl. Naruto, having had enough, grabbed the aggressor's arm tightly, causing the crowd to stare in amazement while others frowned. "Leave this girl alone, what you're doing is wrong," Naruto said with a frown as he released the arm of the aggressor girl and stood protectively in front of the blonde girl. The blonde girl was surprised to see him do that, but out of nowhere a boy was going to hit Naruto who didn't dodge the blow and simply received it full in the face. His sisters who were watching this looked with a frown. Isabel was going to interfere, but Lilith stopped her and pointed to her brother to Isabel's confusion. "Is that all you've got?" Naruto said as he punched the boy hard, sending him flying into the crowd. The crowd watched in amazement as the older blonde boy appeared almost unharmed. "If I see anyone harassing or bothering this girl again, I promise you'll end up in the hospital," Naruto said with a dark look, causing the crowd to disperse. The boy was carried away by his friends, leaving the three brothers and the younger blonde girl alone. "Who would have thought Naru could be tough?" Isabel said mockingly as she approached the two blondes with Lilith by her side, who also smiled at her younger brother. "What can I say? I always am," said Naruto with a touch of arrogance, which made his sisters laugh. The girl behind him, noticing her, looked at her with concern. "Hey, are you okay? My name is Naruto Fritz, and these are my sisters, Lilith and Isabel," said Naruto with concern as he checked to see if the girl was physically alright. Historia Reese, thank you for defending me," Historia said softly while Naruto smiled, confusing the little blonde girl. "Historia is a nice name. Don't worry, I couldn't let a nice girl be bothered by them," said Naruto with a sincere smile, while Historia blushed deeply at what the blonde boy said, but then she realized something. "I thought the Fritzes hated the Reeses, just for being the second branch," Historia said with a slight frown. The three brothers raised an eyebrow at what she said. "I don't really care. We're all people in one way or another, we're all the same," said Naruto with a sincere smile that made the younger blonde blush a little, something the Fritz sisters noticed. "Hey, stop bullying my friend. I leave for just a second and I already see some bastard bothering her," said a female voice that attracted everyone's attention. She had dark brown hair, tan skin, light-colored eyes, and a slender build that made her look somewhat unfeminine. She wore the same female uniform as the other girls, only a bit messy, with a jacket on top. "Ymir, you're wrong. Naruto-san, who's here, defended me. If it hadn't been for him, I might have been beaten up," Historia said, the last part with a hint of sadness, causing Naruto to place a hand on her head while smiling at her. "Don't be sad. Those guys are just idiots who let themselves be swayed by social pressure. What they say about you shouldn't have any weight on you," said Naruto with a smile while his older sisters smiled at him as did Historia, while Ymir, at the blonde's comment, lowered her guard a little. She seemed like a good person. "Yes, it was very nice making new friends and all that. Sorry we have to go. Classes are about to start," said Lilith, taking Naruto's arm while Isabel looked at her with a raised eyebrow and then shrugged. "See you Ymir-san and Historia-san," said Naruto with a friendly smile that was copied by the younger blonde, while Ymir simply gave him a slight wave. "I don't understand why you're in such a hurry to get to class if you're just going to spend all your time sleeping in them anyway," Isabel said, shrugging. Lilith ignored her sister's comment, while Naruto laughed at what she said. Naruto and his sisters passed by a group of 3 kids, one of whom was a girl. As they passed by, Naruto felt a strange electric current and glanced at the boy who had passed by him, but he couldn't make out his appearance well, and Lilith pulled him away before he could do so. "I'm telling you, I had a super weird dream. It was like seeing the end of the world and the weird thing is that I was causing it," said the boy's voice while the other boy next to him looked at him curiously. "So you're telling me that in that dream you were some kind of revolutionary leader? It's like a reverse isekai," the boy said curiously while the other boy shrugged. "Your dreams are strange, Aren," said the girl's voice, making the boy who suggested the isekai thing laugh. "I guess so, but it felt so real," Aren whispered, shaking his head as he continued walking with his friends to class. Insert Shingeki no Kyojin ending 5 Name of Love. After all classes ended, Naruto met up with his sisters in their classroom and was ready to leave when Isabel interrupted him. We can't leave yet. We promised we would accompany Oka-chan home, Isabel said, making Naruto look confused, since when he woke up this morning there was no one else at home except Lilith and Isabel. I suppose it's unavoidable that you've forgotten them. After all, your mind is elsewhere today, said Lilith as she grabbed her bag and went with her brothers to the exit where a couple of people were waiting for them. Goodbye, world. When Naruto saw the people waiting at the entrance, his world stopped and he couldn't stop his eyes from welling up as he was about to burst into tears. Unable to join the shadows that spread. The people at the entrance were a young woman holding the hand of a girl of about 11 years old. The woman had long, loose black hair down to her lower back and pale skin, light brown eyes that reflected nothing but kindness. She wore a white button-down shirt with a coat over it, a skirt that reached her knees, and high-heeled shoes. A wish for light. The little girl wore an elementary school uniform, had waist-length red hair with 2 bangs on her forehead, beautiful jade-colored eyes that reflected only innocence, and milky skin like that of a porcelain doll. When the girl saw Naruto in the distance, she smiled with joy. I'm still looking for an unknown scenario. It really is. You too, Naruto said as tears streamed down his cheeks and a smile of pure joy spread across his face. Oka-chan, Naruto said through his tears as he slowly began to walk toward the 2 people. With an exchanged promise. Naruto suddenly had a faint memory, one where his mother was, one that made him sad for some reason. Flashback. Naru, I know the path you've traveled to get here has been difficult, and I'm not one to beg for your forgiveness, but I just wanted to tell you that. I'm very proud to have been your mother. I know you can change the world, Madeline said through tears, while Naruto had light tears on his face. Thank you, Mom, said Naruto with a sad look on his face as he stroked his adoptive mother's hair. End of flashback. I just want us to call each other by our names. That memory intensified Naruto's feelings of sadness, causing him to run towards those 2 people who meant so much to him. I just want to share my joys with you. Charlotte, said Naruto as he ran towards them both with tears on his face at the mention of that name, one of the names that filled him with so much joy and sadness at the same time. Flashback. My name is Charlotte Fritz, sir, Charlotte said nervously, causing Naruto to be surprised by this, but then he regained his senses. Tell me, Charlotte, do you want to come with me and leave this place? Naruto said with a kind smile, making Charlotte think about it for a few moments, but then she nodded. But before she could say anything, a slight tremor shook the area, making Naruto frown as he felt Lilith's power being activated. Without saying anything, Naruto and Charlotte left the ruined house, and Charlotte watched in amazement as Lilith, transformed into the colossal titan, walked around shooting down enemy planes that were firing at her. Charlotte, from now on I'm going to protect you. I want you to inherit my power. By the way, my name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki, said Naruto with a smile, while Charlotte, not knowing what he was saying, nodded. Yes, Mr. Naruto, Charlotte said nervously, making Naruto smile. He then picked up Charlotte, who was surprised at first, and carried her to a safe place. End of flashback. I just want our words to be confirmed by us. For some strange reason, that memory filled him with immense joy, making him laugh happily as he ran through the academy toward the exit. Then, another memory came to him as if it were a vision. Flashback. That means that from now on I can call you Dad, Charlotte said with a happy smile, which Naruto found beautiful, and without saying anything, he kissed her on the forehead. Charlotte, no matter what happens, you will always be my daughter, Naruto said with a happy smile, while Charlotte smiled back. End of flashback. I just want us to hug if there's pain. After quickly descending the stairs, Naruto ran through the crowd of students and rushed to the exit. Without Madeline or Charlotte expecting it, Naruto hugged Charlotte tightly, carrying her to the girl's surprise and joy. Are you somewhere in this world? I really missed you so much, Charlotte. Naruto said between sobs, drawing the attention of some students who watched the scene with curiosity, while some girls found it very sweet. I love you so much, little one, Naruto said through tears, making Madeline smile and Charlotte laugh, who hugged Naruto tightly. In order to find that miracle. I love you too, Oni-chan, Charlotte said with a smile as she hugged her older brother figure. Naruto, still holding Charlotte in his arms, hugged Madeline, who hadn't expected it completely, but she returned the hug anyway. Please don't forget. Oka-chan, I'm so happy that you're my mother, Naruto said with tears of happiness which, unexpectedly, also infected Madeline, making her smile sweetly as tears ran down her cheeks. About me. I'm also proud to have you as my son, Naru, Madeline said through tears, as for some reason she felt a strange feeling of nostalgia when she hugged her son. She didn't know exactly what it was, but something inside her told her never to let go of him. And my true self.